everybody watching. Let me give me a second. Make sure that it's on. Let's see here. Live. Let's test. Welcome to the live show. It is here, and we're live. And I'm going to bring this up and make this here. We'll just wait for some people to jump in. I made a post on Instagram too just now, so hopefully people will see it on Instagram. I do these surprise lives. I just kind of jump on live and let whoever's around jump on. Usually we get about like a few hundred people jumping on. They'll be watching, but the video will be up and people will be. Oh, there's our people. There's our team. Wendy, what's up? Wendy's already in there. Okay, cool. Awesome. All right, sneak attack always. Yeah, I know, guys. I'm sorry, I pop up with these sneak attacks. I try to make it more noticed, but whatever. Today we have got a special guest, though, guys. The gentleman with me today is Jerry Marzinsky, and for those of you that don't know who this amazing dude is, he was a clinical psychotherapist. Is that what it is?
Well, that was a psychotherapist.
Psychotherapist, right? Yeah, and you worked with like the criminally insane individuals and people that had schizophrenia and these kind of mental trauma issues, right?
Right. I've been working with them
Mm-hmm.
for decades, and especially studying the voices that schizophrenics heard,
Yes.
which which the psychiatric mafia report to be hallucinations, and
Yep.
saw that these voices were running patterns. They ran very predictable, uh, very straightforward patterns. Right?
And so you were able to identify that they were indeed potentially entities rather than
Right.
voices that schizophrenic people were hearing.
Well, they are voices that schizophrenic people are hearing, but the difference is
Mm-hmm.
the psychiatric mafia says they're hallucinations.
Yeah.
If they're running patterns, they can't be hallucinations.
Mm-hmm.
Hallucinations are random; they're all over the place. You never can predict what a hallucination is going to say. You know, but the voices, the psychotic voices, the schizophrenic voices, they're running stark patterns. I mean, one of the first that I came across was they are consistently negative. You know,
Mm-hmm.
virtually everything they say is negative. You're stupid. You're ugly. You're everybody hates you. You're worthless. I mean, any rotten thing that you could think of, these things are telling these poor people. You know,
Mm-hmm.
and one of the problems that they face is like, where is this coming from? And
Mm-hmm.
when the psychiatric mafia is telling them it's you, your brain is broken, you've got a chemical imbalance, um, and the only thing you could do is take our toxic medications. That really throws them for a loop,
Mm-hmm.
you know, because
So yeah, I think this is interesting because just so you guys know, Jerry Marzinsky has been helping people with schizophrenia as well and helping people recover and heal them, and get away from these kind of things and dealing with these voices, which basically I would say under the scientific perspective, you've essentially, with recognizing patterns, semi proven that the voices are indeed real entities, and you refer to them as entities as well.
yes,
And these are things that from my perspective as a deliverance minister who prays and casts out demons, I just call them demons. So like, and this is what I deal with as well. So this is going to be an explosively interesting conversation, guys, because we both have like dealt with this experience. And I don't know too many people. I know other deliverance ministers that I've talked to that deal with this kind of stuff, but I don't know too many people that do what you do, especially from a scientific perspective. And I like to look at things from a scientific perspective, even though I'm dealing with supernatural and spiritual things. And so like I tend to look at it very logically in a lot of ways. So I think there's a lot of crossover, and hopefully today we'll have some really cool revelations that we'll be able to share with one another. But this is going to be a really interesting, you know, an exorcist and a clinical psychotherapist conversation about demons and entities. Now, I'm curious, like when you call them entities, right? And like, do you think there's a difference when it comes to demons or entities, or is it just the same thing? What do you think?
Uh, if you look at the operational definition of how they
Hmm.
behave, it's the same thing as what the Bible calls demons. It's the
Mm-hmm.
same thing as what Emanuel Swedenborg
Mm-hmm.
calls demons.
Mm-hmm. Who's Manuel Swedenborg? I don't know who that one
He's
is.
a Christian mystic who lived some 300 years ago.
Okay.
He was
Mm-hmm.
given complete access to heaven and hell.
Hmm.
You know,
Interesting.
so he was told by Jesus. So he was the chief mining engineer for the Queen of Sweden,
Hmm.
and was making her a fortune. He was one of the top scientists of his day. You know, he was kind of like Leonardo da Vinci in a way,
Hmm.
inventing all these things. He was a metallurgist, he was a scientist, he was highly educated, and at the age of 50, uh, Jesus showed up to him and said, "Okay, stop all that now. I'm going to give you access to heaven and hell, and I want you to go talk to the spirits in heaven and hell, and then come back and write about them for the people on the planet."
Oh, that's very, very
And
interesting.
so he did. One of his first books was called Heaven and Hell by Emanuel Swedenborg, and
Hmm.
you look at his conversations with these demons,
Mm-hmm.
and they match what these schizophrenic voices. I mean, it's a one-to-one match. There's a one-to-one
Really?
correlation. Right?
So you've read through some of this person's stuff.
Oh, I've
The
read a lot of his stuff.
okay. That's fascinating because there is a lot of there's a lot of content when you're getting into this type of a space of people that have understanding where it's almost like you're unsure if what they're saying is demonically inspired by the demons, by the voices to persuade us to believe a narrative that may not be true, And I've noticed that this is kind of like a common theme. And in the Christian world perspective, like a lot of Christians don't even want to read other books because they're afraid that maybe that book was inspired by something demonic. And in fact, there's a lot of understanding to that that's very relative. In fact, every movie that you see today is like practically demonically inspired. I don't know if you know of the word. Do you know what scrying is? Or okay, so you don't know about the occult in that regard, or the deep in parts of the witchcraft stuff, but there's things like cursive. Like, do you know why it's called cursive? Have you ever noticed what like it's well, okay, so like the English language is very occultic, where it's a witchcraft language derived from English, which is Anglo-Saxon, which is angel, okay, of Saxons. And so there was angels that had sex with women in the book of Enoch. They talk about this in more detail, but it's also in the Bible. And they created a lot of things in our world. Metallurgy is actually one of the things that the demons invented. So when you mentioned that he worked with metallurgy, like my ears like perked up because I'm like, oh, that's questionable. Like immediately that's how I think of it because I'm like, huh. So the demons invented metallurgy. They actually invented like created this understanding of how to manipulate metals, and it's actually some of the megalithic structures that we have in the world today were actually potentially created by these knowledge from these demons, or the demons themselves created some of it. And so reading into some of these kind of things, you'll get perspectives of little tidbits of information, but a lot of Christians will be afraid to look into some of this stuff because they don't want to be influenced negatively. I've noticed, but yeah, it's a very touchy
Well,
subject.
the thing is, they got to get their heads out of the sand, though, too. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
Jesus, what he
Mm-hmm.
exercised, what, 23? I
No, there's
think
a
it
lot
was
of demons.
20,
Yeah,
23 times he removed demons from people and set them free.
yeah.
And that's real clear. But yet you have a lot of these Christian
Mm-hmm.
churches. Well, we don't want to go there. We don't want to talk
Mm-hmm.
about this stuff. It's not the angels that are causing problems. It's these demons. And one of the greatest feats they've accomplished is for people to not believe they exist.
Oh, absolutely.
Then they can operate in pure obscurity. You know,
Mm-hmm.
get away with whatever they want. Now, what was interesting is, when I started being attacked by these things, and they scared the bejesus out of me a few times, there was another fellow who wrote a book. He was a clinical psychologist. I read his book a good while ago, and he was a Swedenborgian. So he was aware that there was a one-to-one match between what he was seeing with his clinical patients, his schizophrenics, and what Swedenborg said about these things, these demons.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and he was working with schizophrenics, and he was making friends. He was trying to understand. what these things were.
Hmm.
So they were leery of him. They were afraid of him, and he was trying to get their trust so he could talk to them, and find out what they were. Now, even though he treated them as independent entities, he always referred to them as hallucinations. So he didn't want to break away from the psychological world completely.
Hmm.
So he would call them hallucinations, but when you saw his interactions with them that he wrote in his book, he was treating them as entities. Okay? Now he wasn't trying to get rid of them as I was. He was
Hmm.
he was trying to make friends with them to see what he could learn about them. And he did one experiment he told me about where he he got a number of his schizophrenics and he said, "Listen, I want to give these psychological tests to you as a patient, and I want to give them to the voices also without your
So wait,
involvement."
to another, he was doing this to another individual as an experiment.
Yeah, so he had a patient who
Hmm.
was schizophrenic.
Oh, wait, also,
Eh,
can you move your microphone just a little bit closer to your mouth? People can barely hear you. There we go. Perfect.
Better?
Oh, that's great. All right, go.
Okay.
Keep going.
So, he had schizophrenic patients who were hearing voices. All right.
Hmm.
He, through talking to them, he strongly suspected that they were demons, like because they matched one-to-one correlation between what Swedenborg was saying the demons were and how they acted,
Hmm.
and what he saw with these voices that his schizophrenics had.
Hmm.
Right? So he was trying to make friends with them so he could gather more information about them. He was hoping that they would trust him and tell him things, but they turned out to be the liars, and
Mm.
they lied constantly. You couldn't
Yeah.
believe anything they said. So what he
Hmm.
did one time is he said, "Listen, I want to run some psychological tests on your voices, and I want to run the same psychological tests on you." Right?
Hmm.
So he told the patient, he says, "You answer these tests, you answer these. Right? Don't let your voices get involved.
Hmm.
And then I want to give these same tests to your
Hmm.
voices."
Hmm.
Right? And he did that, and he scored them up. And he said that the tests that the voices took, he said the voices were much more psychotic than the patient was.
Mm.
You know, I found that interesting.
That is very
Um,
interesting. You know, well, keep going. I don't know if you had an idea going. I
yeah,
was going to mention
there was
something.
some other stuff he did, but I can't remember it right off bat.
Hmm. You know what you just described is actually called channeling, and in the occult world. And so, like in witchcraft and stuff, like people channel spirits. I was getting into the language. I forgot to mention this. It's called cursive for a reason. Like just like it's called spelling in our language, it's called spelling, and then we've also got grimoire, which is where we get the word grammar, which means witchcraft. Okay, the books of grimoire, which are the old books of witchcraft. And so like when you realize that like our language is heavily involved in like demonic influence, like it's insane how much of it's involved. But like things like cursing or cursive, you write in that scribble where it's like it looks almost like loops, right? It
hmm
just looks like continuous. That's a form of channeling. That's a form of demonic inspiration writing. So cursive is actually the earliest form of witchcraft writing, one of the earlier forms, not the earliest, I would say, but they would like basically people would channel and let the spirits control their hand and start writing stuff in scribbles, and then they would look at the scribbles and read the words that the demon wrote out. That's actually where cursive comes from. It's a spell communicating with spirit channeling language. And so you were mentioning like how this person was like letting the voices answer for them. What a lot of times people are doing is they're channeling. People that are dealing with schizophrenia or these kind of hearing the voices kind of situations is they are allowing the spirit to channel through them. And so as a deliverance minister, I have to like express to people like not to do not to do that. Cuz like when you let them speak through you, or when you let them give answers and you listen to them, that's what channeling is. It's just like the same thing as going to a medium who's like, "Oh, your great grandfather says this," like they're listening to something, it's giving them inspiration. A lot of times these things giving them an inspiration are demons and they're liars, but sometimes the demons will, get a kick out of giving somebody truth, right? And so the root word for demon actually comes from daemon. In the Greek, it means the ones that know. So like demons know stuff. And so this is like they're very much aware of things, okay? And they know all kinds of stuff. In fact, I've had the voices. I don't know if you've had an experience, but I've had an experience where the voices knew stuff about me personally, like through a person where I've dealt with somebody, talking to somebody, and the person said stuff and called things out in my life when I was not like fully righteous, and it was humiliatingly embarrassing. Okay, I'll tell you, like, because he said some like incredibly personal things about me through a random person that didn't know me. I don't know if you had any experiences where the
Well,
demons knew stuff. I'm curious.
I've had it happen with other,
Mm-hmm.
um, with my patients,
Yeah.
where they
Mm-hmm.
knew stuff that the person didn't. You know,
Mm-hmm.
for instance,
Mm-hmm.
when I worked in the prison, I mean, when I
Mm-hmm.
started off at the state hospital, it was the biggest, probably one of the biggest psychiatric institutions on the planet at the time. There were like 10,000 patients there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there was resistance. You know, it was when I started seeing that there was a correlation between how much these patients were listening to their voices and how much trouble they got into,
Mm-hmm.
and how often they quit their classes or got in trouble in the classroom. You know, there was a correlation there. So I started asking around, like, what are these things? And of
Mm-hmm.
course, what they're teaching in
Mm-hmm.
graduate school is that they're hallucinations. You know, no, everybody just bought that. It was
Mm-hmm.
like virtually all the staff at that hospital bought they were hallucinations. All right. Um,
What
and
gave you an inkling that it wasn't a hallucination, that it might be something more? What gave you that first initial sort
well,
of
the first thing I did was, I didn't get any solid answers. So I started asking the schizophrenics themselves, what are these things telling you? You know,
Mm-hmm.
and it took me about a year to get to where I could talk to them because they didn't trust me. They didn't trust psych people. It's the psychs were putting them on meds. They were locking
Mm-hmm.
them down. They were, so there was a lot of distrust there. I had to overcome that. But one of the first things I found was that they were consistently negative. You know,
Mm-hmm.
if they said something positive, it was kind of like an anomaly, or it was at the start when they were trying to get the patient's trust. They say, "Oh, we're spirits and we know stuff and we can help you," and they
Mm-hmm.
played like they were Christ. They would play like they were angels. They can take almost any form the person wants. But what they would do is later on is turn and stab them in the back,
Yeah.
right? So they were friggin' consistently negative. So I'm like, uh, why aren't they, you know, why aren't they random like all of their hallucinations if they're
Mm-hmm.
hallucinations? Why
Like,
aren't
why
they
isn't
all
it a
over the
pink
place?
elephant that they're seeing or
Yeah,
hearing, like,
yeah.
oh, I love you so much?
Why are they running
Mm-hmm.
patterns? And one of those first patterns was
Mm-hmm.
they were negative. They were consistently negative. All right. And my question was, what holds them on that negative, what holds them to that negative path? Why aren't they swerving off of that negative path? What's holding them there? Something was.
It's interesting that you mentioned that they're negative because there is actually a very famous individual who talks about his golem, who he listens to. I'm trying to think of his name, Larry. I forget his name right now, but he's very famous, rich, powerful individual that actually gave Jeffrey Epstein. Maybe I shouldn't have said that name out loud. Okay, but he gave him his mansion. Okay, on live show. I hope I don't get something bad happens. But he gave him his mansion, his original mansion, and this dude's very powerful. Somebody in the comment, maybe you can write his name in there. But he this individual actually talks about listening to his golem, his demon. It's the Jewish term for this kind of thing that gives him guidance on what kind of things to do, what kind of investments to do. Gave him a lot of money. He became wealthy by listening to this thing that was not actually necessarily bad for him because it gave him, benefits in his life, right? It gave him good stuff that increased his life. However, the dude's very, very questionably ethically evil. Okay, so it's almost like when you see these patients that are dealing with schizophrenia type stuff, I've noticed the reality is this, like, the reason why the demons or the voices are attacking them so much is honestly because their heart, they don't want to give in to the wickedness that these voices are suggesting. However, if these people can hear them, and so the voices return and they retaliate and attack them. However, the people that do give in to the wickedness, we don't even know that they're schizophrenic. Those people actually end up becoming very high profile individuals in our society today that are listening to demons. They are legitimately powerful, rich people that aren't classified as schizophrenic, but they are indeed listening to voice. And they've admitted on several interviews, you can hear some stuff about these people, have admitted to listening to entities. But the difference is the people that we deem schizophrenic are the ones fighting against it or emotionally tormented and don't want to give in to the wickedness and the evil that they're suggesting. But the people in power, who knows what kind of wickedness they've given into at this point. And we don't even, like, we just don't know because they're listening to the voices and they're agreeing with them and they're not tormenting them. I don't know if you've ever considered that or thought about this type of perspective.
Well,
But
I've had two cases that I remember.
Mhm.
One guy told me he was hearing voices. He said the voices would tell me he would rob places, and he said the voices would tell me which houses to break into, when the people were up in there, and then where to go hide when I got out. So he said, I was making a lot of money robbing houses, and he told me one story where he broke into a house, got in the window. The voices told him about where the loot was, not exactly where, just the general area. And
Wow.
he found it, and then as soon as he found it, the one of the owners woke up, and the voices warned him, said they're up, get out of there. All right, so he got out, and apparently the owner had called the police, and he jumped out the window, and he was going to go down this alley to his left, and the voices said, no, don't go down there. The police are coming down that alley. Go to the right. So he ran to the right, and they told him to hide in a garbage bin, one of those big metal garbage bins. And sure enough, as soon as he got out of the way, the cops pulled up to the house through that alley where they said the voices said they would come.
Mm.
So they told him to hide in this garbage bin. He was hiding in the garbage bin, and the cop walked by with a flashlight. And as soon as he passed, the voices were telling him, "Okay, now get up and get out of there and run." And he said, "No, no, it's too soon. They're too close." And the voice said, "Do it. Just close it quietly. Do it." So he did, and he made it back to his apartment, but he left all his loot in the trash can. So he said when he got back to his apartment, the voices were telling him, "Good job. You did a good job." And he said, "No, I didn't do that good a job. I left all the loot in the garbage can." The voices said, "No problem. You just go get it in the morning." You
Mm.
know. And he said he was very successful at robbing houses that way. And I said, "Well, if you were so successful, what are you doing here?" And he said, "Well, I got greedy and I broke into a house they told me not to." And he
Oh,
said, "That's the one I got caught in."
wow. Very fascinating. And
Now,
see that, this is, there's so many people that people are not aware of that do listen to voices that have become powerful through wicked means. And I think this is very important. I mean, this is why the conspiracy world exists, guys. Like, this is literally like why this exists because it is very real. There's a lot of people listening. There's a lot of people that listen to voices. There's a lot of people that hear voices. I would argue to debate that almost everybody is hearing voices, but the reality is a lot of you don't recognize it. You just don't recognize it. People that are schizophrenic, we deem, they can tell that it is something that's not them, but it's subtle suggestions that are being given to people all the time.
well, a lot of them struggle with it. When you know, we assume that when we hear
Mm-hmm.
everybody's hearing voice in their head all the time. Okay, there's constant babble going on. But when these schizophrenic voices show up, they start inserting negative, malicious thoughts into the thought stream
Mm.
because they're spiritual entities. So they have complete
Mm-hmm.
access to the person's memory. In
Oh yeah,
schizophrenic, they can pull up every rotten thing you ever did, and then accuse you and make you feel guilty of it. And once they
mm-hmm.
stir up enough negative emotion, then they drain that negative emotion. That's what they feed off of. Right?
That's interesting that you say they have access to the memory because I've noticed. I'll share an experience of them wiping someone's memory. Have you ever seen that happen? I'm curious. You ever seen them wipe a memory?
I've seen them wipe good memories. Like when
Mm.
they're given instructions, this is what you do. Pray the 23rd Psalm. Stay away from negative stuff. They, if the schizophrenic doesn't write that stuff down, by the time we're done the session, 80% of it is not recoverable anymore. They won't remember it.
Yep. Dude, you know what? I've prayed for somebody. I'll tell you a crazy story. I prayed for a guy with another guy, two people in the room. Friend brought this other dude. We ended up praying. Demon full on manifests in the guy and starts speaking through the guy uncontrollably. Like he can't even control it. Like it's talking through his mouth and he's out. He doesn't even remember it. The demon possessed man goes over to the our mutual friend, and our mutual friend's like, what is happening? The dude starts speaking ancient Hebrew. He starts speaking Aramaic. This is some white kid that does like nerdy white kid, okay? And he just starts speaking another language to me. And we're all like, what is happening? And we're like, this is not normal, right? Dude afterwards walks over to, after we're praying and in the middle of it, he walks over to the other guy and he touches the other guy on the forehead. He goes like this, boop. And the other guy goes blank. And he's like, what just happened? And dude, the other friend doesn't remember. He said afterwards we talked to him and we're like, do you remember the part where he started speaking in like Hebrew and stuff? And like, he's like, I remember him like subtly speaking, like making gibberish sounds, but I don't remember him saying word. Like, dude, wiped the other guy's memory by touching him, bro. Touching him. One of the most nuts things I've ever seen. Like, I don't know if you've ever experienced anything similar, but like it's just such a fascinating thing to have witnessed a demon possessed schizophrenic person wiped another dude's memory by touching him,
Mm.
which is, I don't even know what to think about it. I still haven't, you know.
That triggers a memory of one person. The last 10
Mhm,
years I worked
mhm,
doing psych crisis in the hospital emergency rooms around Tucson.
mhm,
And there was one where I was working in the county hospital where there was this schizophrenic lady, and she was pretty far out of it, and in the psych annex. And I was talking to her, and all of a sudden she jumps up, she flies past me, and then heads straight for the nursing station. So she can't see the nursing station from where she was in the first place.
mhm.
It was blocked out by the wall. But she gets up, she runs straight for the nursing station, makes a beeline for this one nurse, jumps over the kind of gate at the nursing station and attacks this nurse as if she could see through the wall that she was there. You know, and it freaked
Weird.
me out. It's like, whoa. I mean, she just made a beeline for that one nurse and attacked
Wow.
her. You know.
When they attack, are they just like choking, punching, hitting? Like what kind of
Yeah,
attacks have you seen?
yeah, punching, hitting, scratching, biting,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. Um, then there was
But you've been protected somehow.
I haven't ever been hurt by them, but I never show fear either. I mean, even
Yeah.
though if I'm scared, I don't show it. You
You
know.
know what? This is a really interesting point too. I'll mention. Did you know that I've learned that the demons can read your mind, but they cannot read your thoughts. Okay, and this is what I've learned from my experience. I've learned that they do communicate to us, to me as a deliverance minister. I've had several times where the demon has spoken to me through the person's mouth, but also in my head while the person's staring at me. And so I know this is kind of a weird seeming thing, but like I can hear the voices in the other people. This is a gift in the spirit. It's called discernment of spirits. It's a
Mm.
biblical it's a biblical gift. It's what the Holy Spirit is given us, okay? So I've been able to hear these things, and I'll share a funny weird experience, I guess. I have a lot of weapons. I used to have a lot of weapons, like swords and axes and like maces and stuff. I used to be really into weapons and knives. And so my whole walls were covered in weapons. And I was a friend of mine that came over was like, dude, I think I might have something demonic. Maybe you'll pray for me. So we start praying for the guy, right? And a lot of these people don't realize they have demons, mind you. Like you're dealing with people that know they have got something in them. I deal with a lot of people that don't know that they have anything wrong with them at first. And when we start praying, something will come through. And then it's almost like it's suppressed that it's been there this whole time and they just are oblivious to it.
Well, yeah, I run
Yeah.
into a lot of that too. There's a lot of them that don't understand. They think it's them.
Yeah. They
And
think it's
and
them.
and what was
Mhm.
interesting is, when I was working in the prison, when I was working at the state hospital, I started asking patients about the voices. When the psychiatrists find out about that I was asking the patients about their
Mm-hmm.
voices, I got pulled up into their office and they were ordered
Mm-hmm.
me to stop. They said the voices are hallucinations.
See,
If you keep this up, we're gonna do a disciplinary something against you.
Well, see, those people were probably demon possessed almost equally, if not as bad as the as the individuals that you were trying to help. The reality is this: they were listening to voices telling them to tell you to shut you up, but they probably didn't recognize that they were listening to voice. Do you see what I'm saying? Like they
Yeah,
don't recognize that they were being influenced by it.
yeah, it could be. So, but it happened twice.
Yeah.
So they
This,
wouldn't even allow you to question so they
yeah.
haven't done it themselves.
No.
They haven't run any tests. They haven't done any studies on what the voices were or what they are. They just, we are psychiatrists. We hereby pronounce that they are hallucinations, just like the
The end.
ancient Egyptian priests of
Yeah.
old. We hereby proclaim that the voices are hallucination. Based on what?
Yeah.
Nothing. They get nothing.
Yeah.
Just their egos.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Yep.
And what makes them even
Mm-hmm.
more devastating is that they tell these poor patients that this is a life sentence.
Mm-hmm.
You never can get rid of them. They'll be there the rest of your life. The only thing you could do is take our toxic medications.
Yeah.
You know,
Poisons.
so it's
Literally.
like that the what is it, that Dante's Inferno thing where they have
Mm.
the sign over the thing saying all who come here give up all hope. That's basically what they're telling these people.
Yeah. Yep.
There is no hope. You got to take these
Mm-hmm.
medications. You're broken. You know,
Mm-hmm.
and we all have that voice in our head. We had ever since we learned to speak. Um, so we think that everything that we hear in our head belongs to us. Nobody ever
Yeah.
tells us any different.
No.
You know. But then when you look at schizophrenics, there's a voice in there that kind of goes against their nature, their
Mm-hmm.
intent. It flies against their intent. They don't want to hurt anybody. They don't want to cuss anybody, but this thing is telling them to do it.
Yeah.
Right? And I've had, a whole bunch of prisoners ask the voices, "Who are you? What are you?" And they
Mm-hmm.
would respond with, "We are you."
Mm.
So they want them to believe that this voice that they're hearing in their
Is
head that
them. Yeah.
belongs to the demons is actually them thinking
Oh
these
yeah.
things on their own. Right? So
Mm-hmm.
if they get away with that, then they got the guy hooked. I mean, he's hooked.
Mm-hmm.
All they got to do now is reel him in.
Yeah.
You know. But
And
if you make that break and say, listen, these things aren't you.
mm-hmm.
You can feel they're not you. They don't feel like you. Their intention is very different from your intention. They're constantly negative. They're not you. You
Yeah.
know, they're coming in from outside you. So that creates the first split. Because
Mm-hmm.
if the person believes that the voices are who they are, then they feel like they're attacking themselves.
Yeah. Well,
They're,
they can't get any kind of freedom
they
to
can't get any
separate. Yeah.
freedom. They're stuck. They're in this
Mm-hmm.
turmoil. And here comes psychiatry going, yeah, it is you. And there's nothing you can do about it except take our expensive toxic meds.
Yeah.
You know.
And so this is really interesting because it's like I was saying, like this is what I deal with is a lot of people that don't even realize that they have something influencing them
Right.
in the same way. It's the exact same thing. Like I literally will, people come to me and they've got like sickness and diseases and they think that their sickness and their disease is literally just this medical thing that's got to get rid of it, and they don't realize that sickness and disease oftentimes is tethered to demons as well. And so I don't know if you've ever I'm guessing this is probably not something that you've experienced, but there's a lot of people that when we pray for people and cast the demon out, when it goes, the sickness in their body, like they'll have disease of some other, like they'll have like a skin disease that's been plaguing them for like 5 years. And we'll pray, we'll cast the demon out, and the skin disease will leave the person, bro. Like I see this kind of stuff so often. It's like it's one and the same. And so like and this is what Jesus was doing, like, right? He was casting out demons and healing people. And so people don't understand that it's not all the situations in their head. Like demons are influencing people, and if they can't get to you by speaking to you, they'll get to you in health. they'll attack your health. You'll attack your body in some capacity as well. And so what I do is try to explain to people and teach people the difference and get the demons out like that. And I mean, it's such a fascinating subject, seeing these kind of responses in a lot of people. I don't know if you've ever experienced people getting healed in some capacity along with the demonic thing leaving them, because I think you've successfully been able to get some voices away from people, right?
Hmm. Yeah, no, I
Mm-hmm.
haven't seen any of that. My question is, how do you keep them away? I mean, once you get rid of them, how do you keep them away?
Yeah, so for what I do with a lot of people, when we get the demon off of the individual, like what I have to do is teach people to seek the Lord, and
Hmm.
like and read the Bible daily, bro. They have to read it daily. If they and like they have to be in a place where they want to know God more than they want their freedom. Does that make sense? Like, if they just want their freedom and they want the demon to leave them alone and live their life, like the demon, you're fighting a losing battle, because this is a spiritual entity that spirit physically you're stronger than it, but spiritually it's stronger than you. Spiritually, these things are stronger than people. And so, if you're not in a place where you want to know the Lord more and you just want to, I just want to live a normal life and blah, 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 good luck. Good luck with your normal life. You
Yeah,
got to need to know God.
yeah. I kind of take a different approach,
Mm-hmm.
and tell them, you know, listen, these things hate the 23rd Psalm. You know,
Mm-hmm.
if you repeat the 23rd Psalm, I've had several schizophrenics tell me it, they react toward it like being thrown, a worms thrown on a hot frying pan.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll tell them this works, and let them figure it out themselves rather than telling them. You know, or try the 91st Psalm also. You know, when they
Mm-hmm.
come, what's worse, repeating the 23rd Psalm or listening to their bullcrap? Just keep repeating the
Mm-hmm.
23rd Psalm until they get sick of it. You know, and there's some other stuff that you can do. They don't like sage for some reason. They don't like sage. They don't like iron.
This is okay. This is very fascinating. Hold on. Hold your horses. They don't like sage. You've learned, because
They don't
I've
like
had
sage.
a different experience.
Oh, have you?
Yes, I've had a different experience understanding this. So, let me explain it to you. I'll explain sage understanding from what I've learned from sage. Sage is a burned offering. Okay, it's a burned offering unto the. You've ever heard of burned offerings unto the Lord?
Yeah.
Okay, so
The whole Old Testament is full of it.
yes, yes, exactly. So like, there's burned offerings. Okay, there is cigarettes. By the way, is a burned offering unto something you don't know. Weed is a burned offering unto also a demon. A lot of people are unaware of, and sage is also a burned offering. And sage is tends to be a burned offering, but it's different. You see, they may pretend not liking to burn sage, and this would be my theory, because when you burn sage, you have actually made an offering unto something. You just don't know what. But what has happened now is, now the demon, rather than being outside of you, because you burned the offering and breathed in the smoke, the demon now can go into you. And it will, so like people that burn sage usually can get like sicknesses or diseases from the demons. It's like another level of demonic influence. But I'm curious what your, this is what I've learned and gleaned from dealing with demonic entities. So like burning sage is like a no. It's like a really bad thing. So
Hmm.
like a lot of times people will have like haunted houses and they'll burn sage, and the haunted will stop because they burn sage, right? There's no more haunting. The problem is the demon now has gone inside of you. It was the outside of your house, he's fine. But when you burn an offering to him, now he's going into you. And now the person will end up getting cancer like 3 years down the road or whatever, because they've been burning an offering to a demon that they know nothing about and they don't understand. So that's what I have gleaned from this perspective. I'm curious what your understanding. Share with me what you've had in this perspective.
Well, I was a member
Mm-hmm.
of the Native American Church for a couple of years in New Mexico, and they burned sage all the
Mm-hmm.
time.
Yeah.
As part of their spiritual ceremonies. You know,
Okay.
I've heard from patients who, they burned sage. They said that the voices didn't like it. You know,
Interesting.
they also don't like iron, not steel, iron.
Do you know in historical context why they don't like iron? Have you ever heard the term fairies iron burns them? Have you ever heard about that?
No, I haven't heard that, but I know in all the old
Mm-hmm.
time cemeteries they have iron fences around the person's grave. I found that
Mm-hmm.
interesting.
Yeah, that I mean, that could be to keep them in or keep them out. I mean, it's that's very interesting indeed. So the because iron though, okay, so like the Bible says that the Lord will rule, that Jesus will rule the world with an iron rod. Did you know that? It says that. It
No, I
says
didn't.
Jesus rules the world with an iron rod. So
Huh.
iron to them, it reminds them of the authority of Christ. And you know another thing about iron? It smells like blood. And they're afraid and terrified of the blood of Jesus.
Hmm.
And so iron to them, I would imagine, would be like a reminder that like they're under the authority of Christ in a sense, because it literally says in the Bible, Jesus returns with an iron rod and rules the world.
Oh, that's
So
interesting. I didn't know that.
very fascinating, right? Look,
Yeah,
look, nuggets we're learning. I love
yeah.
it.
Frankincense. I've heard they don't like frankincense.
Okay, Frank. Yeah, that makes sense. I suppose frankincense was like, and myrrh. I would imagine they probably wouldn't like myrrh too
Yeah.
either.
They don't like niacin and niacinamide for some reason.
Niacin. What is that? Remind me what that is.
I think it's vitamin B. It's a form of vitamin B.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
interesting. They don't like
And
vitamin
and
B.
and they hate the what do you call it? The Gregorian chants. They can't stand the Gregorian chants, especially the French ones.
Have you had patients play these things to
Yep.
see how they respond?
Yeah. They don't like it.
Hmm. Interesting. That's very fascinating. The Gregorian chants. It is. I believe they're in Latin, correct? Or are they in French?
Well, there's all different kinds. I mean, they have
Yeah.
them. You know, the French ones are the ones that I heard they
Mhm.
hate the most for some reason. I don't know why.
Interesting. That's very fascinating. What I wonder what the chants are actually saying. I wonder what the words that are being used in that. Have you looked into that?
Well, I've listened to them, but I didn't listen for the content because it's like almost chanting.
Yeah.
You know, it's hard to make out.
Well, they're words. They're being said. They're being
Okay.
spoken, right?
Yeah, but I couldn't make them
Hmm.
out without a lot of struggle.
Hmm.
Yeah.
It's also fascinating because that's if they are almost nonsensical in some capacity, it sort of veers into the realm of speaking in tongues. Have you know about speaking in tongues?
Well, I've watched one of my friends do it. I mean, he broke into it and it sounded like he sounded like a Roman gladiator when he did it.
Yeah.
But he was a very religious. You know, he's
Uh-huh.
one of the most religious guys I've ever seen.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
goes to church every Sunday, you know, prays all the time.
Hmm.
He broke into that and it just kind of it took me back, you know.
Yeah, it hit you in a
It hit me
way.
and it was loud and it was just like some kind of Roman gladiator, you know.
Yeah. There is a very significant power to speaking in tongues, Jerry. Like I'll tell you right now that when we cast out demons and I do this, like they hate tongues. They absolutely hate it. So if speaking in tongues is like it like dude, I've literally I was skeptical. I was very skeptical of speaking in tongues in the very beginning. I thought it was like weird and witchy and unusual. But the Lord spoke to me pretty clearly one day and was like that. Like I encountered some like heavy demonic spirit. I actually had a random person. I was sitting at a lunch. I had just cast out a demon for somebody, and I was sitting with my friend at a table and in public, and I was talking. I was like, "Do you think this like psychosis? Do you think demons are like in their head? Do you think it's actually real?" As we're having the conversation, a homeless dude with tattoos on his face, down his hands, wearing like a regal like jacket from like the 1700s, but it was like all torn up and dirty. Looked like he walked off a movie set from The Mummy or something. Okay, this homeless, the creepiest, scariest looking dirty homeless guy I've ever seen in my life, walks up and like behind me, I don't see him. He throws dice by my head. They go wham and they slam into the thing. He pulls out a deck of cards, shoots them in the air in a circle around me. I'm in public. Okay, there's like some buff dudes that just went to the gym at this restaurant that we're sitting at. They're like, like they're all like terrified of this guy, right? This dude throws these dice and then like shoots cards around me and starts casting a spell on me in the middle as I'm having a conversation with a friend. I'm literally asking him, do you think demons are in people's head? Like, and this dude, this demon possessed dude, does this thing to me and like starts speaking in tongues. Like he starts speaking like and he like starts speaking some weird like language sound. I don't know what it is, right? And I'm like,
freaky.
Bro, terrifying. Like terrible. Like the dudes, there's like these buff dudes that went to the gym afterwards. They're like looking at me like that was the most terrifying thing we've ever seen. Like, and so the dude does this and he's like reaching his hand out, casting this spell on me. And I'm like, okay. And then like I hear the Lord like, be prepared. And I'm like, I'm gonna cast a demon out of this fool right now in the middle of this like square. I'm like, stand up, and I grab this little fence between me and him, and he stops and he turns and he stares at me, and I'm having like a stare off, and I'm just looking at this dude, and I'm like, Lord, I'm gonna do it. And he was like, wait. And I hear like Lord say like, wait to me, and I'm like, okay. And then he's like, the dude just like looks at me and he turns around and runs away. And I'm like, okay. And the Lord's like, I just want you. He goes, I want you to know what you're up against. And I'm hearing this in my head kind of as I'm staring at this dude. And I'm like, okay. And like the Lord's like, this is what you're dealing with. Like, it is not a joke. It's very real. Like, and then the Lord told me specifically in that moment, he goes, and next time you encounter one of them, you speak to them in that language. And I'm like, no, like, no way. I'm like thinking, okay, God, like, sure, like I don't want to speak in this gibberish language this homeless dude just spoke to me, bro. I was like, all right, God, I'll do it. Like and then I had a week later, I had an encounter with another demon possessed dude that we knew was demon possessed. He talked and we took him to this church, and I didn't know what to do because this is before I knew how to cast demons out. I cast one demon out by accident, and then I didn't know what I was doing, couldn't get the demon out. This experience happens right in the beginning, and then I'm like, I take him to the church, and the Lord's just like, now speak in tongues. And I'm like, and he's like, guys, I think I'm fine. He's like, I really don't think that, and this, mind you, this is the demon spoke through this man earlier. And he's like, no, guys, I'm totally fine. I think it left me. I think I'm great. I think I'm good. And like we took him to this other pastor who she prays in tongues and she like casts out demons, like really intense. And she's praying for the guy, nothing. And then like, I'm just like praying for the guy, and I hear the Lord goes, speak. He's like, guys, I think the demon left me, guys. I think I'm fine. And I'm just like, and I'm like, I start speaking under my breath quietly in tongues, and I just do it. I don't know what I'm saying. I'm saying gibberish, right? And the Lord's like, speak louder. I'm like, okay. And I just look up and I'm like, and I start speaking it, right? Out my mouth, just gibberish sounding coming out my mouth, right? Bro, the dude that is like sitting there totally fine immediately like manifests, starts like growling, like dude, that thing comes out of him, goes flying against like the wall. He's just like, and he starts screaming, like, and just like, dude, the most intense experience I've ever had. This was my first ever speaking in tongues experience, by the way, and it was like full-on demonic manifestation out of this dude. And the demon started talking through the guy, like started speaking to us, started confessing. Dude, we cast the demon out of the guy. It was a very gnarly, intense experience of me ever speaking in tongues. So, like, something interesting to add to your arsenal if you ever want to get into speaking in tongues on how to deal with some of these entities. But let me warn you.
I don't know if I could get away with that like you did.
Yeah.
If they found out about that, I don't know. But my intense one was, as these number of these patterns started coming up, the time when I could really investigate what the voices were was when I got to the prison, because they closed down all the psychiatric hospitals. They closed down all the state hospitals. So these guys were out on the street. The only way they could survive is by robbing people and selling drugs, that kind of stuff. So they ended up, instead of being in the state hospital, they ended up in prison. So the prison had hundreds of them in there. So what I did is form groups that were willing to talk to me in real time about what their voices were hearing, what they were hearing. from
Mm-hmm.
their voices. So it was like I had a window into their heads. And, you know, these patterns kept coming up, and it kept coming up with all of them. The next one was they were anti-religious. They didn't like God. They didn't like church. They didn't like to go to church. They didn't like to go to ice cream socials that the preacher was holding. Um, you know, it was clear that they were anti-religious, and that came up over and over and over again. So what kind of hallucination would be anti-religious? You
Mm.
know, it was very clear that they were anti-religious. They wanted nothing to do with Jesus or church or God or even talking about it. You know, if you mentioned Jesus or anything spiritual, they would just shut down. All right. Um, and it was clear by the content of what their voices were, they were trying to foster negative emotion, you know, based on the stuff they were telling these people. You're no good, you're ugly, you're stupid, everybody hates you, you're a drain on everybody, just why don't you just go ahead and kill yourself, you know? So here they are fostering this negative emotion, and then once they would stir that up, then all of a sudden the person's energy would just disappear. You know,
Mm.
and that would happen time after time after time. So there was a one-to-one
Mm-hmm.
correlation between the voices showing up and attacking these patients and their energy levels dropping down to nothing. You know, and I found that interesting because there was that correlation there again, and they didn't even realize that was happening until I brought
Mm.
it up. You know, and one I remember one prisoner telling me, he said, I was hearing voices all night, and when I woke up and when I got up in the morning, I felt I was so drained. I felt like I was digging ditches in the hot sun all day. All right? He said I was that drained. They couldn't get up for breakfast. These things were draining them, and it was real clear that these things were parasites.
Mm-hmm.
So what I would do is I'd bring that up and ask them. I said, um, you know, every time you the voices come, your energy level disappears, right? You go, yeah, yeah, right. And you'd ask them, well, where where did your energy go? And they go, well, I don't know. And I'd say, well, if you stuck your hand in a fire 500 times and each time you were burned, what's burning you?
Mm.
They had no trouble saying, oh, it was the fire. So then I'd turn it back and I said, you've been hearing the voices for years. They've come thousands of times, and each time they came, you were drained of energy. What do you
Mm.
think it was that was draining you? You know, most of them would still say, I don't know, because they felt so bad they couldn't tell the difference. You know, but when I started pointing that up, the voices got very agitated.
Mm-hmm.
They did not want these people to know that they were parasites and that they were sucking their energy, that they were living off of their life energy. You know,
Mm.
and you know, when I after I you know, left the prison system after 18 years working in the psych department. I went to work in you know, the hospital emergency rooms. The hospital emergency rooms didn't want you working with patients in there. They just wanted them out. You know,
Mm.
the doctors didn't know what to do with crazy people. They didn't know what to do with schizophrenics. They just wanted them out of there so they could put medical patients in there that they knew how to help. So it was up to us to find them somewhere else to go. You know, either
Mm.
send them to a mental health center, admit them psychiatrically to the mental hospital, send them home, whatever, to just get them out of there. But that kind of bothered me, that shallow kind of thing. So I was
Mm.
thinking, what what what's the least amount of information I could give them that would help them the most? And one of those things was that the voices aren't you. They're not coming from you. Their
Mm-hmm.
intention is very different from your
Mm-hmm.
intention. You know, they don't mean you any good. And you know, the second one was that they drain your energy. You know? And when I was doing that, you know, these people that were coming into the hospital, they were coming in raw. You know, they weren't medicated. They came in off the street. Often the police drug them in there, and you know, I knew they would be moving on soon. So I'd go. The other thing they needed to know, other than these voices weren't them, they weren't who they were, was that they are vampires. They're parasites. They're sucking
Mm-hmm.
your energy. And I remember this a couple of times. I had to be careful with this, um, and careful with which ones I told also, because I didn't want them running to psychiatry saying, "Oh, hey, this dude is telling us that these are demons in your head." That
Yeah.
would really
Yeah.
do me in too, because psychiatrists were always the enemy. It was like I always had to creep around past them, to
Mm-hmm.
work with these guys. So there was one gal, she was really out of it, and I was going to put her in, and I wanted her to know at least those two things. And I was asking her, "Are you hearing the voices right now?" And she says, "No." I said, "Well, when did you last hear them?" She said, "An hour ago." I said, "Well, I'll tell you what. In about 30 seconds, they're going to be screaming bloody murder. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
If you need to leave this office, you're free to go. I'm not going to bar you from the door. You can just go through the door and go pace around the psychiatrics for a while, and I'll see you when you calm down." So when I told her that the voices were parasites, the voices went nuts. They started screaming bloody murder. She ran out of the office. She tried to get in the bathroom. She couldn't get in the bathroom. She started running around the psychiatrics, and the psych nurses going, "What'd you do to her? What'd you say to her?" And I said, "She'll be all right. She'll calm down in a little while. Just give her a little bit of time." And
Mm-hmm.
she did, and she finally came back. But they hate being um,
Called out.
people knowing that
Yeah.
they're parasites. If you
Mm-hmm.
had a big leech on you, you wouldn't just sit there and look on it and go, "Oh well, that's okay." You do something about it, you know. So
Mm-hmm.
once these people knew that these things were sucking their energy, that changed their whole attitude toward what they were. If they're sucking their life energy, they were a threat.
Mm.
Right.
Yep.
So with
Yep.
those two pieces of information, that they would hit back. Um, so as these number of characteristics, these patterns that the voices ran increased. Now there's 23 of them I have now. They're
Mm-hmm.
all on my website under articles under jerrymarzinsky.com. They're there in black and white. Anybody who's working with schizophrenics, anybody who has schizophrenic family, go look at these patterns. They're right there in front of your face. You can see them for yourself. They're
Mm-hmm.
not buried in some chemical imbalance theory that the psychiatric mafia came up with. They're not buried in some genetic anomaly anywhere that you
Mm-hmm.
can't look at. You look at these patterns, you'll see them. They're clear as
Mm-hmm.
day. Negativity, anti-religious, foster negative emotion, energetically drain their victims. Get louder after sunset, which is another one that happens.
Oh, really?
Um,
Interesting. They
yep,
get louder after
they get
sunset.
louder after sunset, and they
That
have some.
that's so fascinating because there's a lot of stuff to do with the moon in connection to demonic possession, and it's like I mean like the werewolves taking over their bodies right when the moon is out. Anyways, but continue. Sorry.
No, that's consistent. They get once the sun goes down, they get louder. Matter
Mm-hmm.
of fact, in old folks' home, they have something called sundowner syndrome, where these
Mm.
old people who are kind of demented, they start going crazy after the sun
Really?
sets. Yeah, it's called sundowner syndrome. And
Wow,
they,
sundowners. I got to talk to you about. We'll talk about old
yeah,
Alzheimer's or dementia. Sorry, dementia. Here in a minute. We'll talk more
yeah,
about that.
they get louder when ignored. So I don't know how many times I've heard psychiatrists tell them, "Well, they're hallucinations. Just ignore them. They're nothing."
Yeah,
No, they get louder. They won't be ignored. You know.
yeah. I've heard you say what you resist will persist.
Yeah, they foster self-destructive behavior. They foster isolation. They demand the attention of the victims, and this goes on and on for 23 of these things. So as these mounted up, I started wondering with the group of prisoners that I had in the prison. I would give them homework and say, "Try this. Come back in a week and tell me how it worked." All right.
Mm-hmm.
So what I started doing was giving them things that would interfere with these patterns. Okay. And they one by one. I usually had 10 to 13 of them in these groups. That not all of them wanted to talk about their voices. They
Mm-hmm.
weren't willing to talk about their voice, especially to a psych. The-
Yeah.
You know, the, they didn't trust psychs very real well. They didn't feel they understood. But I knew enough about the voices to tell them, well, I know they're doing this. I know they're doing that. I know they're doing this. Is how they behave. I know about these things. Can you tell me anything more? So they
Mm-hmm.
saw that I was trying to understand them. So I would give them exercises to try to trip up these patterns, mess up these patterns.
Mm-hmm.
And one by one, they were returning saying they don't like him. The voices don't like him. They don't want us coming here. They don't want us listening to you. They don't want us to do these exercises. They want us to just stay away from you. You know, but they came anyway. Yeah. So here they are all reporting that the demons didn't like this stuff. And what I would do is when I found out something they didn't like, I would tell the patients to give them more of it. You know, because this
Love it.
this this wasn't like in the psych wards where I think the psychiatrists were afraid of these guys, and if they found out I was telling them to do things that would upset the demons,
Mm-hmm.
you know, they'd go nuts. They'd probably fire me. But in the prison,
Mm-hmm.
you know, if one of these guys went and complained,
Yeah, warden's gonna be like, what?
yeah,
Shut up, get out of my
yeah,
office.
yeah, the warden would be, get out of my face, man. What are you talking about? You know, get out of here. You go
You're a
play in,
prisoner. Shut up.
yeah, go play in the yard. So that, you know, a prisoner complaining about a psych asking him questions about his voices wouldn't even hit the threshold to
Yeah.
set off a reaction with staff at all. You
Yeah.
know,
Mm-hmm.
so I kept doing that, and uh, they started getting more and more intense. They didn't like what I was doing and
Mm-hmm.
interfering with them. So one of the prisoners one day as he was leaving my office, and he was slowly getting better, he turned around in the doorway and he said, "You know what you're doing is dangerous, don't you?" And
Mm-hmm.
then he just turned around and walked away. And I'm like, "What was that all about?" You know, I'm going, they're in their heads, they're not in my head. They can't get in me. I mean, it's like, you know, I didn't know what to make of it. I didn't ignore it, but I just kind of stuffed it in my backpack of things that I didn't understand, but to be
Mm-hmm.
aware of. Right? So I just kept doing the same stuff, and the voices were getting more and more agitated. And then uh, that I think it might have been even that same guy. I don't know how he got into the medical unit that day, because usually they have to have a pass to get in there.
Mm-hmm.
This guy showed up in my office in the medical unit, knocked on my door. I opened it up, and he goes, "The voices want to talk to you." I said, "They want to talk to me personally?" He goes, "Yeah, they want to talk to you personally." That had never happened. In like 15, 20 years, that had never happened. It was always the voices would tell the patient something, and then the patient would tell me. Then I'd tell the patient, tell them this, and he would tell them that. You know, so it was always going through the patient. They never spoke to me directly, and that was like in 15 or 20 years that hadn't
Mm-hmm.
happened. So it's like that was weird. So I'm looking at him, and he goes, "Yeah, they want to talk to you personally." And I'm like, "Uh-oh, what's going on here?" You know, it's like outer limits time. Do 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 do. Yeah. Say, okay, come on in, have a seat. And I said, "What do they have to say?" And these words came out of his mouth. He said, "You have no right to
Mm.
interfere with our way of life."
Demons like to refer to themselves as they, them. I've noticed this
Yep,
quite
yep.
often.
And them plural. So it
Yeah.
wasn't the patient saying that. And it took me back, and the prisoner said that that wasn't me saying that. That was them. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
say that. And I said, well, tell them this. And he said, I don't have to tell them anything. They can see you. They can hear you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't have to. They can see and hear everything you say. You know. So there was kind of some banter, like I said something like, "Well, you're destroying these people," and then I don't remember where it went from there because I was kind of in shock. That was like 15 or 20 years. It was at that moment where I realized that these things were entities. Before
Mm-hmm.
that, I was thinking, well, that's something to do with their subconscious or they're psychologically injured, and I was making up all these rationalizations. But it wasn't that they were demons or that they were separate. It was like I don't understand what these things are, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to find out. But at that point, it was like, okay, they are demons. They are separate entities, and
Yep.
I went into shock. I
Hmm.
closed my office. I didn't say anything all day. I was just looking out the window. You know, um,
Wait,
but
wasn't that experience where the zapping thing happened? Was it the
now
same time?
that was the next one.
Oh.
So here was the progression. It was first what you're doing is dangerous. Um, you have no right to interfere with our way of life, which didn't
Mm-hmm.
stop me either. I kept going,
Yeah.
working with these patients. Then the next one was I brought in a book by Miguel Ruiz, who was a Native American shaman,
Mm-hmm.
and he was talking about these things as energy vampires. You know,
So real quick, I'll tell you something. So shaman is actually where we get the word showman, and so shaman and showman is actually it's interesting. So a lot of the stuff that they may have, like there's understanding, but a lot of that understanding, like Satan is actually called the original showman. He was the one that showed the apple to at the Garden of Eden. He was the showman. He shows man. And in fact, the word in ancient Chinese and Japanese for the word covet is actually two trees plus the word show. And so like the word show always means Satan. It always refers to Satan. And
right.
so our word showman and shaman, it like, they may have wisdom, they may have understanding, but like I always tend to like take things with a grain of salt because I'm always like,
Well,
when we say,
I was gonna test it out
yeah,
because
yeah, yeah, test it out. Yeah,
I
yeah,
read the thing,
yeah.
and whoever wrote that, they
Hmm.
knew
They knew
that
something.
they knew something, and
Yeah.
they knew that these things were parasites.
Hmm.
You know, so I brought that
Hmm.
book in, and I was I had the paragraph outlined, and I brought this one patient back in, and I said. I was always asking them questions. I was always hitting them with question after question after question about the voices. I have hundreds of questions about how they reacted to this, how they reacted to that, what they
Hmm.
do when you did this, what they do when you did that, how they react to this exercise kind of thing. So I started reading that paragraph about them being parasites. And right when I hit the part they were parasites, all of a sudden this crackling exploded behind my head. It was like an
Mm.
electrical crackling, and it was loud. It sounded just like an arc welder. And it just crack, 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 crack. And it was moving from behind me toward the right wall in my office. And I look at him, and he's looking at me with this zombie look. I mean, his eyes were just like, just like zombie. He looked like a zombie.
So you were reading the book to this guy?
Right.
Mm, okay.
When that happened, soon as I hit the part where they were parasites, this
Boom.
electricity erupted. So after after a few seconds, I looked at the guy and I said, "Do you hear that?" And he's just staring at me. He just, like a zombie. He's just sitting there. He's not saying anything. He's stark still, just staring at me. And this thing's crackling over to the right-hand wall. And I'm trying to keep an eye on him. I'm thinking he's going to attack. I'm like he's
Hmm.
going to attack. So I push my chair against the wall, so if he comes at me, I could kick him back. And then I'm trying to split my attention between this loud crackling and keeping an eye on him to see what he's doing. And it starts crackling up the right-hand wall, just loud, just like an arc welder, crack, 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 and cracks all the way up the right-hand wall. And then it starts moving across the ceiling. While it's doing that, I'm not seeing anything. I don't see any light. There's no smoke. There's nothing visual there. And I'm splitting my attention between him and this crackling noise. So when it went over his head, I could see them both at the same time. I could see where the crackling was coming
Hmm.
from and watch him too. So it cracked all the way across the ceiling. And this wasn't like a short burst. This was like 25, 30 seconds. I mean, it was
Hmm.
going on and on and on. I'm sitting there like,
Hmm.
what in the frick is going on here? And it starts crackling down the left-hand wall, and it's moving toward my leg, and it jumps into this Rubbermaid trash can by my left leg, and it's crackling in there. And I bend over and I look in there. There's nothing in there. I could hear it crackling, but there's nothing in there. And then all of a sudden, just boom, it stops. And as soon as it stops, he slowly gets up and he goes, I gotta leave. And he shuffles out of the office. And I'm like, yeah, yeah, get out of here. Go, go,
Hmm.
go, go, quick, go. You know, and as soon as he left, I got up and I started examining the walls, and I didn't see there wasn't any physical evidence that anything had happened at all.
You
And
know, it's
I'm starting to think I'm going insane. I'm starting to think I'm losing it. So I could run across the hall to the doctor's office. He's not in yet. The nurses aren't in yet. There was nothing that could account for that crackling. And
yeah,
I heard it. I heard it for close to 30 seconds. Uh,
yeah.
And I'm totally freaked out. I mean, it was like boom. You know, I closed the office and just stared out the window for the rest of the time. I felt like, where is this going? am I going crazy? I mean, it caused a lot of confusion and concern with me because
Mm-hmm.
now this is getting wild. This is going into another dimension, and I didn't have any cognitive map of how to navigate that dimension. You know.
Mm. That's yeah.
So I didn't want to see that guy. I didn't call him back for probably 3 months. I didn't want to see him. I didn't want to run into him on the yard. I didn't want to talk to him. But after about 3 months, my curiosity got the best of me. So I called him back, and he shows up, and he looks good. You know, I thought he'd be a wreck. If something like that was in him, I thought it would destroy him. And he shows up. He's got good energy. His affect's bright. And I said, "You look good." You know, and he goes, "Well, why does that surprise you?" I said, "You know, after what I experienced the last time with you, it's like I thought you'd be a wreck." And he goes, "No, no." And I said, "Well, how are you doing with the voices?" And he said, "Well, I'm using the stuff you taught me. They're not gaining any ground, but I'm not winning any either. It's like a Mexican standoff." So he sits down and we start talking after some, kind of some small talk. I said, you know, "Did you hear that crackling the last time you were into my office?" He said, "Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I heard it, but I was afraid." He said, "But I was surprised you did." So he didn't think I could hear it. I said,
Mm-hmm.
"Yeah, yeah, I heard it. I heard it very well for a long while." And I said, "What was that?" And he said, "That was them." I said, "Them who?" And he says, "The voices." I said, "That was them?" He said, "Yeah, that was them." And I
Mm-hmm.
said, what were they doing? What were they trying to do?" He said, "They were trying to scare you off." And I said, "Well, they did a damn good job of it."
you,
And then
you, this is funny. Somebody commented this. I know another therapist who had an electric zapping in his office. He was dealing with a pedo in jail. He is a strong Christian as well. Kind of interesting. So that electrical zapping thing is not uncommon, apparently, to people dealing with this kind of stuff. And I would actually go as far as to say that technology was given to us by fallen angels, and it's potentially that electricity itself was a technology provided to us by fallen angels. And it just like metallurgy was created, but it also, by the way, guys, doesn't mean it's evil just because it was given to us. In fact, the Book of Enoch mentions that man will not be held accountable for the things taught to them by the fallen angels. So you're not actually held accountable just because you work for metal. I know somebody asked that question as well. But it's interesting thinking about electrical zapping sound, because this is part of the reason why the Amish actually believe that electricity is demonic, and
oh, is
that's why
that
they,
so?
yeah, because
Huh.
the Amish believe that electricity is like originated from the devil, like, and
Huh.
it's like satanic, and it's funny that you see this zapping connection.
Yeah.
I'm just like drawing the connections there,
Yeah.
and
That wasn't the end of the story.
yeah,
So,
continue.
um, uh, what I asked him, I said,
Hmm.
"You looked really weird when you left my office that day." I said, "What were the voices telling you as you left my office?" And he looks at me right in the eye and he said, "They were telling me to get a shank and stick it in your gut."
Mm.
And I'm thinking, "Oh, he wouldn't do that. I've been working with this guy for 6 months. I know him better than most other inmates. He wouldn't do something like that." So I didn't believe it, that he would actually act on it. I said, "Well, why didn't you do it?" And he said, "I couldn't find one and nobody would give me one."
Mm. Yep. Bro,
You
when
know,
I've heard you say this story on one of your other things, and the moment I heard you say that, I felt like the Lord said, I have protection over him. And to be completely honest, like, I felt like the Lord told me that you have been protected from this for like the Lord has preserved you and protected you because of what you're doing. You're actually doing something. You're doing the Lord's work. Whether you realize it or not, you're
oh,
doing what God
yeah,
wants you to do.
yeah, I realize it.
Yeah.
I know I'm doing that. Although I always felt that because there were other, psychs that I worked with who were attacked and were
Mm-hmm.
seriously hurt by these
But you
people.
but you weren't. You
I,
haven't been.
I haven't been. There,
That's
there was
amazing.
a close call once, but I kind of triggered it,
Hmm.
because I had a
Hmm.
medical intern with me, and she was wondering what schizophrenia was all about. So
Hmm.
there was this Indian Apache. You don't mess with Apaches. You don't mess with drunk Apaches. They are very dangerous. So he
Hmm.
was in. He just kind of got into the hospital, and I figured, okay, I'll twerk him a little bit, see if I can't get a little bit of a reaction out of him to show
Hmm.
her how unstable these guys can be. And
Oh,
I didn't do a whole lot, just enough to kind of maybe irritate him. That guy picked up this big, massive chair and hurled it at me across the room, and it just barely, I could feel it
wow.
just, go through
Dude,
my hair,
dude,
and
I
then it
had,
smashed against the wall.
bro, I had almost an identical experience. That like praying for it was a girl that she started to manifest, bro, and she picked up the chair like from the arm of the chair and lifted it up straight. Like I couldn't do that. Like I cannot lift the like no one can. Like she lifted it up perfectly straight and went boom and threw it across the thing and the chair just freaking exploded. And then she grabbed another chair and went boom and threw it across the room.
Oh
So I've
yeah, they
had
they get supernaturally strong.
yes,
I tell you, in the prison,
insane.
you have these guards in the prison that are kind of like macho. I'm in control. I got the badge, and they only mess with schizophrenics once.
And then they learned.
They don't do it again. And the most violent one I ever heard of. This took place in another prison, not mine, but I talked to uh, two guards that were there when it
Mm-hmm.
happened. This happened in the Florence prison. There was this one big, strong schizophrenic guy locked in a
Mm-hmm.
single cell on the first floor. So this big prison had 3 floors,
Mm-hmm.
and he was on the first floor, and they wanted to move this guy to another cell. You know, so I hear the doorbell ringing.
Oh, it's all right.
So I'll let it go. Um, so where was it? They want to move him, so they told him, okay, cuff up. We're going to move you to another cell. And he goes, I'm not moving anywhere. And they said,
Mm.
you cuff up, or we're gonna hit you with the pepper spray. I don't know if you've ever been around that stuff. It's nasty. It's nasty
Mm-hmm.
stuff. It burns. It feels like you had acid dumped on you. You can't open your eyes. It's nasty. You can't breathe it. It's nasty. So he starts cursing at those guards and going, "You bunch of weenies, come on and get me. You want to move me? Come on in and get me." And
Mm-hmm.
they weren't about to do that. They, either cuff up or we're going to hit you with the pepper spray. And they had like these quart cans of pepper spray.
Mm-hmm.
So after he refused several times, instead of just locking him back up and turning off his water and not feeding him until he agreed, no, here's a direct confrontation. And here's all the other 2 tiers of prisoners looking down at
Mm-hmm.
what's going on down there. So it's like the guard against the inmate. So they got their pepper spray and they emptied like 2 big cans in there, and the inmate got a towel, wrapped it around his head, so it protected his face, and they just drenched the whole inside of his cell. It was so thick that they had to back away because they were being affected by it. And
Mm.
then after they sprayed in those cans, they said, "Okay, now cuff up. Come on out of there." He goes, "You bunch of fairies, you bunch of homos, come on and get me." So he's putting them down and mocking them, making fun of them.
Mm.
And they said, you come on out of there. We're going to get the stun gun." So they have these 50,000-volt stun guns that
Mm-hmm.
it's like a little dart that has a
Yeah, yeah,
wire
yeah.
attached to it,
Yeah, yeah.
and they shoot it, and it hits, and then these 50,000 volts go through the wire. And I've never seen a prisoner stand up to that. I mean, soon as they're even the biggest ones, soon as they're hit with that, boom, they're down. I've never
Mm-hmm.
seen anybody stand up to that. I mean, so that's
And
told.
he just withstood it.
Yeah, he withstood it. Um, Not only did he withstand it, they got a second one, and they were hitting him with two.
Yeah.
So one was
Mm-hmm.
charging, the other was discharging.
Yeah.
I think they did that 13 times before the warden showed up, and he said, "Stop it! They're going to get me for cruel and unusual punishment." The
Mm.
guy still wouldn't come out. He's cussing the guards. He's mocking them. He's calling them fairies and pansies and every other rotten thing that they can think of. Um, and they said, "Okay, you know, come on out of there. We're going to get the dogs." Now the
Mm-hmm.
prisoners were terrified of the dogs. These were trained killer
Yeah.
attack dogs. I mean, they would just tear them to ribbons. And the prisoners were more afraid of that than anything else. So they went and got the dog handler, and they said, "Okay, we got the dog. You either come out of there, we're going to sick him in there on you." So he goes, go ahead, sick him in there, you bunch of pansies, and he's mocking them and making fun of them. So they open the door to the cell. They sick the dog in there. This guy's sitting on his bed, and he throws up his arm in front of his face, and the dog grabs it and chomps down on it right to the bone. And
Mm.
he's gushing blood, and then he pulls the dog right up to his face. So he's looking the dog right in the face, eye to eye, and he says, "Sit." And the dog sits, but it doesn't let go of his arm. And then he starts petting the dog like good puppy. Good
Yeah.
puppy. And the dog handler and all these guards, by then there's like 25 guards out there, and
Wow.
all the prisoners are watching this. So they grab the rope that the dog was tied to, and they actually pull the dog, out, and the dog's got him, and it
Mm-hmm.
pulls him out of the cell, and then they beat the crap out of him.
Mm.
You know.
Wow. Yeah.
So I never saw a human being, a psychotic human being, that could stand up to that kind of punishment. I mean,
No. No. It's
it
demonic. It's
was
supernatural.
demonic. It was supernatural.
People right now in the comments, they're like, there was a little bit of demons flowing up in the comments, like arguing some of the things we're saying. I don't know if you see my screen if I show you this. I'm just gonna show you something real quick. Let's see if my screen will be visible. I'm gonna show you. Let's see if that works here. I'm waiting for it to like display. Let me see if I can see myself. Okay. So this is a demonic. Yeah, this looks like it's visible. So here's what we'll do. So I'm just gonna show you something for those that are wondering like what some of the demonic stuff looks like. This is, I don't know how well that's gonna not
Yeah,
reflect.
I can see it.
You can see it. This
Yeah,
is me praying for a dude which by the way, they strip people, like the demons love to get people naked. And so people ask like, why don't I post videos of people that I pray for when I'm casting demons out? I don't post it because it's humiliating, guys. And I have recording stuff in situations for like legal stuff to be safe, right? But like I don't post this kind of stuff because like it's embarrassing, it's humiliating. Like, and these people, like I feel bad for him, but like, dude, like this dude, the demon stripped him, like basically stripped him naked, and like is like freaking out. His whole body is shaking. Dude, it's pretty gnarly, the kind of stuff that I see. And like I've had like hundreds of people that I've prayed for, situations where like they're just like totally fine, and then all of a sudden it's like the demon will manifest and they will start throwing up like uncontrollably. Or like this was here's an interesting one. This one I did, the Lord let me put this one online, and I don't actually post many of them, but like this is the kind of stuff, like when we're praying, like they're manifesting, and like the demon will speak through the person. I don't know if you can see that, but like it's humiliating, it's embarrassing, like their whole body will contort. And so like it's like pretty gnarly, some of the stuff. And like this woman tried to come into my building. She couldn't even get through my door in my front of my building without having a full on, her whole body just started convulsing, because I have angels that stand in my doorway. Her whole body just started convulsing. And then it's like, I see this kind of stuff, like we're talking again, mind you, this woman didn't think she had demons at first, and then like this, as I'm praying, like her whole body just starts like doing this. And she had a bunch of sickness though. She had sickness, like she had lupus, she had all these like what you would call diseases or allergies, right? And as we're praying, like, bro. So this is the kind of stuff that I deal with quite often. I don't know if
oh
you can see
boy,
it.
that's freaky.
Bro, dude, the stuff I've seen, man, like so for all those people that are like, oh, Brian doesn't post his videos of casting out demons, bro, it's very vulnerable. It's humiliating, and I'm not about to like expose people and just be like, whatever. Like, bro, it's not something that I think is appropriate to put out. The Lord hasn't commissioned me to be like, hey, Brian, release all these videos of all this stuff that you've cast out demons. So for all those questioning the kind of stuff that I do, there you go. There's a little bit of why I don't post it. I think it's embarrassing, bro. I've had people like, dude, we were praying for somebody, this girl, and she was like, she was an escort, okay, and like high profile escort, a friend of a friend, and she was dealing with some stuff. They brought her over, and she was like, yeah, I just, I've been struggling with this and this. And I was like, well, it could be demons, like we can pray for you and see what happens. We started praying, bro. The girl just started stripping, like just started taking her, like ripping her clothes off. I had to stop. We had to stop praying for her. We were like, stop, in the name of Jesus, I bind you. And she's like, comes to, and she's like, why am I in my underwear? It was like, dude, it was nuts, bro. Like, it was like crazy stuff that like, and the people won't remember sometimes. And so like, I can't expose that, but demons do like to get people naked. I've noticed this is like a very, I don't know if you've experienced that with the schizophrenic people. Like, I'm not about to be posting some video like that. Like, that's so like, it's humiliating and embarrassing. These people, it's vulnerable for them, and it's like, that's not love, guys. It's not love. You don't like go around exposing people because they've like had something demonic, bro. Like, and like, dude, so many people up in the comments, like a lot of you guys, I can see your demons in some of your guys' comments, like over here, like freaking out, just hearing this conversation between us. Like, your guys' demons are like losing it, some of them, and it's comical to me. But like, you need prayer. If you guys need prayer, I do offer prayer. I have a website called demonerasers.com. Y'all can go to it. You can sign up. There's a little thing every Saturday, all Saturday. I pray for people and heal people and cast out demons. So if you're questioning of it, and you need some prayer, go there. I don't post this stuff because I don't want to be flooded with millions of people looking for deliverance. Like, I don't want to be flooded with all these people trying to like, get healing. Like, the Lord leads you for me to pray for you. He will lead you for me to pray for you. I don't need to post the video. If I posted the videos I have of people getting healed and demons getting cast out, I would have thousands of people coming to me, but that's not my point. My point isn't to do that. Okay. I'm not sitting like, I do it for free, guys. I don't charge money. Like, I'm doing it because I love people and I'm helping people. I'm not doing it to like, get everybody doing all that. So if you guys ever wondered what it is, I could show you guys millions of videos, thousands of videos of people that I've seen, things, demons getting cast out and stuff. But I don't think it's appropriate. Okay. So that's a little sub question for all those people asking in the question, all those people asking in the comments. Maybe I'll send you some stuff though, Jerry, some videos you can look at of some of the demonic things that I've dealt with.
Oh,
and bro,
they're spooky.
Bro, it is terrifying,
I
bro.
wouldn't want to.
Look,
one of the most terrifying ones, beside that crackling, okay,
mm-hmm.
one of the most terrifying ones I had was, and this was like, I picked up the shift
Mm-hmm.
at the hospital on, I think it was Christmas Eve. So I was there on Christmas Eve nights,
Mm-hmm.
okay, and it's fairly quiet. And in comes this one guy that's shaking like a leaf. He just can't stop shaking, and he's laying there shaking under the covers. Finally, I got around to doing an evaluation on him, brought him in, and I said, well, what's going on with you? And he goes, well, I've been using a lot of meth. And meth just opens them up.
Oh, meth is the biggest demonic doorway.
It's the devil's drug. It is.
It's so bad.
It just opens them up and says, come and get me, So he was injecting it, and he'd been injecting it for 10 years. So once he told me that, I said, dude, you should have been dead 5 years ago. And all of a sudden my curiosity's peaked. It's like, why is this guy alive? Why is he still alive? Nobody else that has been injecting meth that long that I know of has ever survived this. So I brought him in, and I started asking him questions. I said, have you seen the shadow people? Because virtually everybody who uses meth sees the shadow people. They're three-dimensional, usually three-dimensional shadows that just walk through walls, appear at their bedsides, and just appear to be watching them. They're not always in the shape of people. They might be in shape of demons or animals or something else, but they're always black, and they're darker than the rest of the room.
Yep.
And if the person is really bad off on the meth, they will see their eyes.
Usually red or green, probably,
either
right?
red or lime green.
Yeah.
So I asked this guy, I said, have you seen shadow people? And he goes, yeah, I see them all the time. I said, what color are their eyes? I don't tell him. He said they were green. They were lime green. And so I started asking him, well, have they ever spoken to you? I figured, none of them ever spoke to anybody. None of the shadow people, of the hundreds of patients that I worked with, none of them reported that they were physically hurt by these things, or that it was physically hurt, or well,
The
anyway,
shadow people.
the
Yeah.
shadow people. If they saw their eyes, they were in much worse shape than if they didn't see their eyes.
Oh, okay. I see what you're
Okay.
saying. Yeah.
All right. So that I use that as a clinical indicator. If they told me they saw their eyes, they were a lot worse off than the ones who didn't see the eyes. That'll
Interesting.
never make it into the DSM, but it works. you know.
Yeah.
Um, so I asked him just out of curiosity because he'd been dealing with these so long. I said, "You ever hear them speak?" Because none of them ever reported that they talked to them. You know, they would show up, they would scare them. I had one girl said that they walked through her and she could feel it.
Mm.
I had one guy said that he felt them inside of him, but none of them were ever physically hurt by these things. So I asked this guy, well, what did they sound like? And he mimicked this high-pitched squeaky sound. They kind of gave me the willies just by him mimicking it. And then I went to ask him another question. I forgot what it was, and he just went stark still, and his eyes disappeared. They just turned black. There was just these black, deep, dark holes, and it was no longer the guy I was talking to. There was
Mm.
something else in there. He went stark silent. He didn't
Mm-hmm.
say anything. He went stark still, and here's these deep, dark eyes that were like, endless pools of just cold hatred. I've never
Mm-hmm.
felt such hatred in my entire life anywhere. It was just, just waves of this dark, cold hatred that I've never, you know, experienced before. I mean, and then it lasted, and I couldn't blink. I had to stare him in the eye. I had to keep looking him in
Mm-hmm.
the eye because I couldn't show fear. You just
Mm-hmm.
don't do that.
No,
You
you
know.
can't. Demons literally know when you're afraid. Like they
Yeah.
smell it like a dog, bro. And if you have any ounce of fear when you go up against a demonic entity, it will rip you. It will. They'll rip
Yep.
you
Yep.
apart.
And I felt that's what would happen. So I had to
Yes.
hold eye contact with this demon
Mm-hmm.
for like 20 seconds. It was staring at me. And then all of a
Fearless. Yep.
sudden, boom, the eyes change back to the patient's eyes, and he
Mm-hmm.
starts shaking again, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And
Mm-hmm.
then I went and asked him uh, another question. I said, what what did they tell you? And he said they told me to go out in traffic and to run into the traffic and get hit and that I wouldn't be hurt. And
Mm.
I said, what'd you do? He said, well, I went out to the street and I went out to the traffic and I jumped in front of a car and I got hit and I got thrown off the side of the road. And he said when he woke up, he was surrounded by these shadow people and they told him to get up. They
Mm.
told him he wasn't hurt. And he said he got up and he wasn't hurt. He said he did that twice and he wasn't hurt either time. So
Mm.
then I went and I asked him I figured this guy knows more about the shadow people than anybody I've ever met.
Yeah,
So I
that's
went
a
to
lot.
ask him another question, and that thing came back again. Here it was even more angry than it was before, with these dark pools of hatred that they just seem to go forever. This deep dark hatred, and here I am staring at this thing again, and I'm going, I can't deal with this much longer. Then finally, after about 15 or 20 seconds, it disappeared again. And I said, okay, I'm not going to ask him any more questions. I can't deal with this. So I send him back, and the psych nurse goes to try to interview him. She comes back in about 30 seconds, and she says, I can't deal with this guy. What did you get off of him? And she wrote her
Mm.
report based on what I said. But that's it. That was scary. That was really
Mm.
scary. I was looking something in the eye that
Was not
just
human.
was not human.
Yeah.
And the depth
Mm-hmm.
of the hatred. I've never in my entire life felt such deep, dark, cold hatred.
Dude, I mean, it's so true. And by the way, guys, I just noticed my website has been down. So thank you for commenting. My Deliverance website, I just realized is broken. And I was wondering because I only had a few people on my Deliverance call last week, and now I know why. So thank you guys for the comment. I'll fix that. I'm obviously demons don't want people to contact me, like obviously. So I'm pretty much pretty much well aware of what's going on with that. So I'll fix that here tomorrow or today or something. But anyways, yeah, dude, it is so fascinating when it comes to demonic stuff. Now, you mentioned something. I don't know if you want to mention it about one of the other people told you that you were protected. I don't know if that's something you want to
Oh yeah,
mention.
yeah. So I was
Tell me about that.
again. This was in the one of the emergency rooms in one of the hospitals, and I'm talking to the schizophrenic girl. All right. I'm writing, getting all the information I need to write my clinical report, and
Mm-hmm.
then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, she just
Mm-hmm.
says, uh, "You're never going to get hurt by, you're never going to get hurt." And I look at her and said,
Mm.
"Where did that come from?" And she says, "You have this giant angel standing behind you." She said, "You're being watched over. You're not going to be hurt." You know.
Mm.
And I said, "Well, that's really good to know."
Yeah.
And that just came out of nowhere.
That's pretty awesome, dude. That's like, and it's funny because it's confirming to me because when I heard you say one of the situations, the Lord told me he's protected. And so it's very fascinating for you when you told me that you had an angel over your shoulder because I've actually been told that I've had an angel following me as well, a giant one. And I've heard the same thing before. Now I don't see in the spirit any kind of thing, but there are individuals that can see in the spirit and they recognize it. Okay, and a lot of people that have this, it's a spiritual gift, seeing in the spirit. But I don't. I hear in the spirit. That's my gift. And I've heard you mention that you can almost feel them in some regard
Well,
too, and
I could
that's a
feel them,
something.
so that was weird. So,
That's a
um,
spiritual gift that you have. Then
yeah,
it's a form. It's
I didn't
it's
know
a
where
form
it
of
came from, but
discernment.
the last years I was working at the prison,
Hmm.
I could feel these things, you know. Um, I could feel how angry they were. I could feel how strong they were. And it got to the point when I started working psych crisis at the hospitals the last 10 years I was working, um, that I could ask the patient, I said, "Are you hearing voices?" And some of them would lie to me. And
Mm.
they go, "No, I'm not hearing voices," because they didn't want to be admitted. They didn't want to deal with it. They just wanted out of there. And I'd tell them, "Yeah, you're hearing voices, and this is how strong they are."
Hmm.
And they'd say, "Well, how did you know that?" And I said, "Well, I can't see them, I can't hear them, but I can feel them." It's like this icky electrical thing, right?
Hmm.
So, you're
That's a,
doing
that's
the
a discernment form. That's a form of discernment. So you have a spiritual gift, technically, Jerry. That's what you're. That's
well,
what
I'll
you're
tell you,
operating in.
it it turned out to be useful, you
Yeah,
know.
it's very
So
useful.
so
My gift is hearing, so I hear them, and I'll hear them in people and on people. But and you have a way of feeling them in some capacity.
I even had one hit me through the computer when I was working with one patient one day.
Oh,
Came
really?
right through the computer, man, boom, and I'm like, "Whoa, that had never
Mm,
happened before." So
interesting.
they proved that they could do it,
Yeah. Though
So
they can go. The time and space is not
it's
bound
not a
by these.
challenge for
Not a
them.
thing to these
No,
things.
they
But bro,
follow these guys anywhere.
dude, and I cast out demons through the computer, and it has it's a safer space because I don't get the physical
Yeah,
demon
yeah.
stuff that I had to deal with. But it's sometimes it works just as well. So I cast out demons doing the same thing. And one of my friends actually, she just mentioned that like Anubis was a spirit that she was dealing with, and it had spoke and like it said that it owned her ex's eyes. The demon said it owned his eyes, and the demon. So there is something connected with eyes mentioning your stuff previously. But yeah, no, there is no time and space. It's not fettered by these individuals. They can move. The demons can move freely. They can come in and out of things, and they can also break themselves off and clone themselves. I don't know if you've learned this one, but they can clone themselves. And have you ever had an entity recognize you? I'm curious if you've ever had that
Oh
yet.
yeah, I had. I walked into the emergency room one day. I was going to work, and
Mm-hmm.
here's this girl laying in one of the psychiatric beds.
Mm-hmm.
I never saw her before, but it turned out that she was assigned to me to evaluate. You know, I didn't say a word to her. Walked in, turned on the computer. The psych nurse gave me, these are the people you need to see. And when I pulled her in, she said, as soon as you walked in the door, the voices said, "Stay away from him. He's dangerous."
It's so funny. It's hilarious. I get the same response sometimes. I've had people be like, don't talk to that guy. Like he's like, don't talk to him. Or I've had, I've heard in the spirit. This is a funny one that I've heard. Walking by people that have demons, I've heard their demons in the spirit be like, shh, 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 don't talk, don't go
Yeah,
near,
yeah,
get away from him, get away from him. And I'm like, that was weird. And then
yeah.
and like the person's like suddenly like freaked out, like
Well,
just
that's
like,
kind of what they do when I'm working. So
yeah,
I use a different form than you do. You know,
mm-hmm,
this stuff I mentioned plus something called the Mace energy method, which is a uh, energetic psychotherapy.
mm-hmm,
So it works with energy. It actually gets rid of negative energy that's built up in the person that's causing these problems, and that feeds the
mm-hmm.
voices.
Mm. See,
So
I deal with trauma, but I've never really perceived it as working with energy, but I have noticed that when I pray for people, my energy leaves sometimes. And it's
mhm.
not every situation, but when I pray with some people, my energy can sometimes just be like zapped out of me. And it's certain individuals. I don't know what's happened, but I do know the Bible, Jesus says, like, who touched me? It was in a crowd of people and he was walking through, and a woman that was sick touched him and she got healed. And he's like, who touched me? And they're like, Lord, you're surrounded by a bunch of people touching you. He's like, no, no, no. Someone touched me with the intent of like basically being healed. And he said, I could feel the power going through me. And so this is what Jesus says. And so I've noticed that there is an energy sort of transfer or feeling of some kind when we're dealing with these kind of entities.
Well, I ran into that in the prison. I found that if I worked with more than two schizophrenics in a day, I would
Mm-hmm.
come back so drained I couldn't get anything else done. I was just
Yeah.
drained,
Yep.
and that happened time after time after time. So I tried to just schedule one a day, because
Yeah.
it was draining.
I
But
can handle up to in my prayer group about usually like about 15. At that
wow,
point, it's like I'm knocked out. I can't like
yeah,
like
yeah.
if there's more than that, like bro, I can't even function. I've gotten off a call and collapsed and like passed out.
Oh,
Like
I'll
literally
bet,
just been like,
I'll bet.
I'm done. Like
So
go to
so
sleep.
I'm working with something called the Mace energy method, which
Hmm.
is it takes the spirit into account. All right.
Hmm.
So John Mace, who came up with this thing, he was a genius. So what it does is it creates a structure since energy flows from negative to positive, and your spirit is positive. Okay. He sets up a structure where, with your attention in this structure, you can link that that pool of negative energy, which is a trauma.
Hmm.
You know,
Trauma. Yep.
most schizophrenics have a lot of trauma. Okay, so
All of it is every
it
person that has it has trauma.
so this system drains that trauma. It connects this structure with the spirit, and the spirit actually drains the trauma. Right.
That's really interesting.
So when it's done,
Hmm.
it's like like let me see if I have the one from this morning. Uh, well, basically what happened is her mother died in front of her, and she didn't call when she was a kid.
Hmm.
So she's like 13 years old. She didn't call the ambulance right away.
Hmm.
Okay, and her mother died, and she made the decision that it was her fault that her mother died and that she was worthless. She
Wow.
made that choice when she was 13 years old. Right? That decision was stuck in there in this big pool of negative energy. Right? So she felt she felt uh, shocked and traumatized by that, and
Hmm.
it had followed her all her life. You know, by the time we were done, that trauma was gone. And
Hmm.
I say, okay, now think back to your mom lying in that bed right now. How do you feel about it? She goes, I feel neutral. It wasn't my fault. I said,
Mm.
can you still feel any of that shock and trauma that you felt back then? And she goes, no, it's gone.
You know,
Right.
this is really interesting because I do the same kind of thing that you're doing, but what we do it through is through forgiveness a lot of times. And so I'll help people to forgive because forgiveness in the Bible is an unforgivable sin. I don't know if you know that, but in the Bible it says if you do not forgive others their trespasses, your heavenly Father will not forgive you. And it says if you hold unforgiveness in your heart, your heavenly Father will turn you over to the demons. So a lot of these people are tormented. And so what I have to do is I have to teach people how to forgive genuinely, honestly let the forgiveness go. But and that works for the majority of people. Like the unforgiveness practice. I also teach people how to let go of pride, because pride is also a huge doorway that gives access to demons. If the person has pride in them, like you're like, literally, God says in the Bible, it says God resists the prideful, but he shows grace to the humble. So if you think you know, or you think you have an understanding and you're dealing with demonic stuff and you think you know better, bro, you're prideful, and like, good luck dealing with your demons. Like, I have to express people, I help them release pride, I help them go through unforgiveness and release unforgiveness, and that shuts the door to the demonic spirits being able to talk to them and influence them. And so that's one of the big ways that I walk people through. I've not really tried necessarily. I let the Lord lead me when I pray for people. I don't have like a pattern with a lot of what I do. A lot of what I do is I'm like, okay, God, you tell me what to do. But there was a dude like that, he was struggling to forgive his dad because his dad beat him. And there was nothing good that he could ever remember about his dad. Okay. And he had this unforgiveness. And unforgiveness invited demons. He had demonic oppression. Right. And so there was stuff that was bothering him. But, as I'm praying, like, the Lord just keeps showing me a shrimp in my mind. I keep seeing a shrimp. And I'm like, why do I keep seeing a shrimp? I'm like, I don't know what this has to do with anything, bro. I'm like, I keep seeing a shrimp. Okay. Like, and I don't know if this pertains to you while I'm praying for you, bro, but like, all I keep seeing is a shrimp. And the dude's like, I'm from Poland and we don't have shrimp in this area where he's at. And he's like, but my dad would always go out on boats and like go fishing. And then he would come back. He would always bring us shrimp. And like, it was the only thing good my dad ever did for me. And like, bro, that broke him. Like, right there, it was like the Lord helped him, and then boom, he saw it, he felt it, and then like, it allowed him to be like, okay, my dad wasn't always so terrible. Maybe there was still some enduring parts about my dad that would always bring me shrimp. Like, and then he like was able to like forgive and like let it go, like, and like release it, and like be able to be like healed through the forgiveness. And that's like the biggest part. But you're telling me another part for your stuff, because mine's through forgiveness. Another part though is, healing the trauma of hurt. But you're kind of in a different, you're not doing necessarily unforgiveness with
No,
what you do.
no.
What exactly, how would you describe? It's just trauma healing basically then, or
Well,
like?
it's what happens in a trauma is you have this horrible, terrible feeling, and
Yeah.
it doesn't go away, and it's not adoptive. It interferes with your life, and
Mm-hmm.
it just stays there freaking forever. And finally, uh,
Mm-hmm.
that's not adoptive. It doesn't help you survive. It's interfering. So the ego shows up and it goes, here, let me handle this, and it
Mm-hmm.
takes it, and it buries it in your subconscious mind, and then it
Yep.
locks it down. Okay,
Yep.
so it's not buried dead, it's buried alive. So
Mm-hmm.
it's affecting your behavior, you know, because it's buried there. So there's an energy ridge there. The ego's pushing it in and it wants to get out. And it's a pool of negative energy that hasn't been dealt with, like a
Mm.
canker sore. It's just there. And the way it affects you is um, if anybody who's similar to the person who abused you shows up in your psychic sphere,
It's gonna bring back
psychological
memory.
sphere, yep, and it triggers that negative
Mm-hmm.
identity. Okay,
Yeah.
so that thing goes off. It tells a person either you
Mm-hmm.
attack that person, or you run from them, or you avoid them. And the universe keeps sending people like that. So it's like this person you hate keeps showing up no matter where you go. That particular kind of person is there. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's interfering with your life. Um, it's and that's one way it happens. Another way you can see it is when you get into a jam and you've been in that jam several times before, and you swear to yourself, "I'm never going to let this happen again." And 6 months later, you're right back there again.
Mm.
Right? So every time that negative identity triggers, it's like a car. When you start the car, the generator charges the battery.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the longer the car runs, the more
Ah, I
juice
see
the
what you're saying.
battery has. Okay,
Yes, you got to
so
drain
you
it all the
you got
way.
to drain it. So here's this massive pool of negative energy sitting there, affecting the person's life, affecting their perceptions, affecting what they say, affecting what they don't say, affecting their attitudes. It's like just this rotten stuff sitting there, and the ego won't let it out, and it's stuck, and it's not consciously available
Mm-hmm.
anymore. So it's affecting the person's life in a negative way. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So what we do is we go in there and we define what that thing is like, what it's composed of. Is it composed of guilt, hatred,
Guilt. Oh
shame?
yeah.
All the facets of that pool, of that cesspool.
Got it.
What does that cesspool contain? Right?
Oh, interesting.
So we're
Okay.
actually pulling it out of the subconscious and making it conscious. Right? And that's
Interesting.
what the negative identity looks like. Right? So
Got
now
it.
we have to get rid of it. What Mace found was that the mind doesn't think, it doesn't ration, it doesn't process. He says what the mind does is it creates pictures of where you focus your attention. He said that's
Mm.
all the mind does. He said the spirit does everything else. It does the thinking, it does the talking, it does the seeing, it does the feeling, it does everything else. He said all the mind does is create pictures. Right?
Mm.
So he found that the mind can create pictures of concepts, it can create pictures of feelings. So he found that if you could turn that list of negative traits that define that negative identity and turn it into a picture,
Mm-hmm.
then you can create this structure
Mm-hmm.
where you can hook it to start a conduit to the spirit. So since negative energy flows to positive energy, as long as they hold their attention on it, don't get distracted, and don't think, that negative flow will go to the spirit, and the spirit will change it into positive potential.
Mm.
Right? It will drain
Mm.
that negative pool, and that pool will not be there anymore. It's like if you get a car battery and you drain it down to nothing, you can't use it again. It won't
Yeah.
reach. It
Yep.
won't charge again. So once you drain that pool of negative energy, it's dead.
And
It's
you drain
gone.
it by basically bringing it to the front, rationalizing it, like basically realizing
Bringing it
it's not
progressively into a physical reality,
okay,
right? And
and
then
realizing it's
using
not true, basically,
no, for
in a
them it is
sense.
true, but what it does is it takes that energy and brings it, delivers it to the spirit. The
Mm.
spirit, like a transformer, transforms it. It doesn't get rid
Mm.
of it, transforms it into positive energy. So if
Oh, interesting.
you look at how energy flows in a battery,
Mm.
it flows from negative to positive, negative to
Mm-hmm.
positive. It all flows from negative to positive.
Mm-hmm.
So you have this negative energy stuck in the mind. The spirit is positive. It's the greatest positive energy in your body.
Well, it's from
If
the
you
Lord,
connect, yeah,
technically.
from the Lord, and if
Yeah,
you connect that negative to it, it just boom,
wipes it out.
wipes it out.
That's
It just transforms it.
that's really interesting. I want to ask you another thing about that in more detail because but first I wanted to tell you something else. My what I kind of leaned from my perspective with dealing with this, like just how you explained it. When I explained trauma, and maybe this will give you another piece to your puzzle of understanding trauma too. Like I've studied hypnosis, and hypnosis I think is what's happening to the majority of people. Hypnosis is basically a form of witchcraft and demonic control. But how I explain it is like when a trauma happens to you, like let's say somebody gets taken advantage of and gets molested or something by their parent, right? And it's like this starts happening to them. They experience the trauma, and they're like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. A lot of times their brain will shut down, and then the trauma will happen to them, and then they'll come back too, and then they'll be like, I can't believe that just happened to me. And what happens is their mind, in an efforts to save themselves from the pain and suffering, will divide a piece of their mind, section off their memory, store the trauma in that memory, and say, we are never going near that portion of the
That's the
brain
same
ever
thing.
again.
That's the
Yeah,
same
it's
thing.
exactly, yeah. And so they go, we're never going to touch that part of the brain.
Right.
And that part of the brain becomes a void space. And that void space is where demons live.
Well,
Demons can live in that
it's
spot.
not
They can
quite a
take
void
advantage of it.
space. There's stuff there.
Well, yeah, of course, there's stuff
It's
there.
negative stuff, but the
Yeah.
demons want that negative
Yep.
stuff.
And I.
So they will trigger that negative stuff.
Yep. And they'll
They will
grow that
actually
space.
they will yep, and they will actually send people that will trigger that thing.
Yep. And
You
well, the
know,
thing is, the more trauma they can grow in that void space, the more they can grow, the more you're disassociating. Because anytime a human in their cognitive mind goes to the sub, because it's like you have your conscious mind, which is your cognitive mind, and then you have your subconscious. Okay, your subconscious, just every memory you've ever experienced is stored in your brain, and it's in this place called the subconscious. Okay, and so all of it's there. You just can't, your conscious mind may not be able to find it. He's like the little ladder dude on a bookshelf, and imagine all your memories are books. Okay, he's the little ladder dude that goes around trying to pull out which book you want. Okay, And so like in those folders though, in those books, in that memory, those are the space. And the more trauma, so like a lot of homeless people, like bro, living on the street is trauma central, bro. They wake up and get knives to their throats, they wake up and get beaten. Like that creates more trauma, which creates more void space for the demon to take advantage of, that allows them to have more control of that person's mind as those trauma parts get sectioned
I
off.
wouldn't look at it as void space. It creates more negative emotion.
So you would call it negative emotion. So
Negative emotion.
Yeah.
It's not void. It's negative emotion, and it just keeps building. And they feed off it. They love it. They will come and pour gasoline on it to try to try to get it to inflame.
Well, this is why, celebrities, a lot of celebrities have someone close to them that dies. Okay, celebrities, by the way, for the most part, are demonically possessed or demonically influenced.
It certainly looks like it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so they have somebody close to them that dies, because when they allow for the death of someone close to them, that's a trauma that is so deep, especially when you're the instigator of it. Like Kanye West actually admits that he sacrificed his mom. He actually says this in a video.
Oh, wow.
And he literally said, I sacrificed my mom. His mom died after doing some kind of little tummy tuck operation or something like that. And she died right afterwards, right? And the doctor's like, she was totally fine. She was healthy when I sent her home. She did not die from that. And Kanye can attest to it. He says in an interview, he's like, I did not kill his mom. But Kanye knows his mom was sacrificed. So he either aided in it or allowed it or whatever, or prayed to some demonic spirit to do this, right? And then, but what's that's done is it's created a trauma in his mind that he doesn't want to go into. It's sectioned off a part of his brain where his cognitive mind is like, I'm not going to go near that. I'm not going to go near that folder.
Right.
And that negative memory of what he did to instigate his own mother's death has made a big black hole that his brain won't touch. But guess what?
Right.
It's still functional and connected to his body. So the demon will go into that spot and get control of him through there. That's why you see two parts of Kanye. There's like the part where he's like, praise Jesus. And then the other part was like, I'm starting a porn company. And you're like, what is happening there? Well, that's the demon taking control of the person through the trauma.
And what Mace does is it goes in there and it drains that trauma. So it's not there anymore. And it works, I'd say it works 94% of the time. If the only time it doesn't work is the person can't form an image of the description of that negative identity. If they can't, if you say, okay, here's all the traits. This is what it's composed of. What does it look like? They have to be able to turn it into an image in order for this system to get rid of it. If they can't turn it into an image, then it won't work. But most people can do that.
Yeah.
You know? And inside of an hour, inside of 1 hour, it's gone. Something that's plagued them their entire life is completely gone. It's not there anymore. They feel lighter. They can feel it's gone. You know. And again, it's the spirit that does it. I'm just the tour guide. I'm just kind of go, okay, set this up, set this step up, set this step up. Now do this and connect this, and you keep your attention on it, and boom, it flows in there. So this is called the ACE energy method. And you can go to my website at jerrymarzinsky.com. We have information about it there. I have some videotapes about it there. But in an hour, it will get rid of the worst trauma. It's gone.
This is fascinating because, like, what you're doing, like, I do the same, I basically take people through the same kind of thing, but I'm doing it and I'm healing people in the name of Jesus. Like, I use the authority of Christ and I let the Lord lead me and the Holy Spirit guide me into, like, how I'm supposed to do this, okay? And it's fascinating because you're working at it from a very logical perspective, doing the same kind of thing. And it's like, and I believe you're being led by the Lord probably for sure in what you're doing, because the reality is this, guys, like God is love. Okay, and you're operating, Jerry, in love. You are loving people when you are helping them. Like, you are literally operating in the anointing of the Lord. Like, God, Christians don't understand this. A lot of Christians might look at what you're doing and be like, this is witchcraft or this is something else. But it's like, they don't understand, like, it's actually love. You're actually operating with the Spirit of God, who is love. Okay, and he is in everything. Okay, and he any good or perfect gift, the Bible says, comes from him. And so I think it's fascinating. I think it's interesting. I'd love to, like, see how your stuff works. And then I'd love to bring you on a prayer call with what I do as well. And then, like, just kind of like see, like, what's going on in the spiritual realm to understand, to be like, hey, Like that's pretty fascinating what's going on here, because the deliverance stuff, what I do in the name of Jesus when we cast out demons and heal people, like bro, I see some crazy reactions. But let me tell you what, there's not everybody gets healed in the name of Jesus either. Like it's not a 100% perfect, just like you're saying with the Mace
mine's
energy.
Not 100%
It's not
either, but it's high.
Yeah, it's very high. It's very high for what we do as well. But again, it has to happen in love, And there's a lot of people that do what I do, cast out demons, and they don't operate in love, and they are completely operating by a spirit of witchcraft, because like there's people that can go, like I can pray a demon off of a homeless person and get a reaction. If I wanted to pull out a camera and walk up to a homeless person and be like, in the name of Jesus, whatever you are, say your name. The homeless person would be like, and they'll start like talking, bro. I've seen this. Like I've seen some crazy stuff, bro. And like I could do this kind of stuff, but this is like not. This is witchcraft. This is manipulation. This is taking advantage. This is not love. This is me giving into demons, knowing and abusing the power of God that has been given to us as believers to do that. And so like people ask again, why I don't do this kind of stuff. I'm not going to post videos like that because it's not love. You aren't loving people. You gotta love, and I see love in you, Jerry. Like when you're speaking, like there is love. There's compassion for these people. You're caring about these people, even though it's like maybe I don't want to get up and be on a call all the time. Like I know that feeling for sure sometimes, but at the same time, it's because of love that you're operating. So you're actually operating in the spirit of the Lord, bro, and that is. I think that's fascinating. I think it's amazing.
Well, it feels really good to watch somebody who made a decision like that at 13 years old, and now they're 60 or 70, and they went through their entire life with this negative identity, torturing them, not knowing how to get rid of it, and it's gone in an hour, and they're freed. They feel lighter. They feel more energy. I mean, it's just to watch that and to watch them just explode with joy. Like, wow, what happened? It's gone. I mean, what happened?
Yep.
It's real satisfying watching that.
It is very sad. Like there's nothing like it, guys. Like
no.
And like the other thing is when you Jerry, you're gonna end up casting out demons in the name of Jesus, bro. Watch, it's gonna happen.
The stuff you do freaks me out. I mean,
bro,
it freaks me out. It's like. I'll watch it, but I don't know if I don't want to jump into.
It's the next level, dude. Wait, let me tell you. And so here's the funny thing is like when you really get into it, bro, and you start like casting the demons out, and like you see people getting healed, not just from the voices, but bro, like when you pray for somebody and the cancer leaves their body, like bro. I've done that. I was like, and their cancer was gone. like there's like I prayed for a dude who had a tumor and he was out of the hospital and they told he was gonna die. Shows up at my place randomly. Dude, I prayed for him. I touched him. Dude, like basically collapsed and like came to and was like, I'm healed. And he knew he was healed. And bro, has been completely healed ever since. No more seizures. No more going to the doctors. No, like, dude, when you start healing people like this, bro, like. It's like, how could I turn away from what I do? Like, I can't, like, I don't do what I do, like, because, I can't deny it at this point. Like, it is so real and it is so like, wow. Like, I wish I could just walk into a hospital and be like, boom, 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 and like heal everybody in the hospital. Sometimes
they'd lock you up.
They would totally would
lock you up.
I want to.
The psychiatrist would lock you up and they'd fill you full of needles.
Yes, and I'm aware of this, so I'm like, man, dang. But and the other thing is too, like, I can't just heal everybody just because I know how to do it. The person has to want to be healed. They have to want it. They have to come to me, and I can reveal the truth to them in the spirit and in truth and in love. And in love, this is key, okay? And this again, like you gotta act in love when you're praying for people. And yeah, demons manifest. You see some crazy stuff, but you can't be afraid. You can't have fear whatsoever, and you have to have love. Like it's like it is so powerful, and it is so like rewarding. I don't know how to describe it. It's rewarding. Like
nothing like it.
Yeah, it's like wow, this person was suffering. And now they're not going to die. Like it's unbelievable. Like it's unbelievable.
Yeah,
so, anyways,
it's almost like magic.
It feels like that in a better form because it's the Lord doing it, and we're not casting spells or mixing brews together. Which, by the way, magic comes like pharmakeia is actually one of the root words for witchcraft. I don't know if you know that. Pharmakeia.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where we get the word pharmacy, which is the reason.
That's what the friggin' psychiatrists are doing.
Yes.
They're just drugging these people silly. Nobody's getting any better. Nobody's recovering. Nope. The mental illness isn't going anywhere. They're just tamping down symptoms. 50,000 people kill themselves in the United States every year. And the great
Mm,
majority of them are on these antipsychotic and antidepressant drugs. 50,000. That's as many as died in Vietnam, year after year after
wow.
year. And there's more psychiatrists, there's more psychologists, and there's more psychiatric medications on the planet now than ever in the history of mankind. And mental illness is out of control and growing every single year. Between 1999 and 2019, it increased 33%. Suicide
Wow.
increased 33%. 24 veterans a day are killing themselves. You
So
know,
sad.
and Mace could help them, but
Hmm.
the VA doesn't want to listen to anything. You
Mm.
know, so 100,000 Americans are diagnosed with schizophrenia every year. It's
Mm-hmm.
100,000 that are taken over by demons every year.
Dang.
You know, and at the same time, the global antipsychotic sales have soared to $14.54 billion in 2021, and it's
The,
estimated to soar to 15.5 billion. We're not saying million,
yeah.
$1 billion every
Wow.
year. This is what the
Mm,
psychiatric mafia is making
mm,
off of peddling these toxic,
mm,
neurotoxic drugs that
mm.
actually shrink your brain with long-term use
Well,
and
they're called
destroy your.
shrinks, right?
Well,
I mean,
yep.
you're called a shrink. Isn't that ironic? I mean, that's the
I know
spell right there.
that's interesting. I don't think they're connected because they didn't know it at the time.
Well, the
But
demons
yeah,
knew it, bro. The
I
demons
think
probably are the
the
ones that named
demons,
it. The de-
antidepressants, they're expected to reach 15.9 or almost 16 billion by
Mhm.
2023.
You know,
Billion. These
the
guys are
irony.
making billions of dollars selling these toxic drugs
Yeah.
that cure absolutely nothing. They're making a fortune.
Yeah. The irony is that the people that are creating these drugs are themselves listening to the voices. Just so you guys know, like the irony of this all is the people involved are probably getting demonic inspiration on how to poison us and how to kill people or how to disable people or whatever. The demons, the people in control have learned and are listening to demons. Okay. And if you could talk to these people that are inventing these drugs, bro, they're getting some inspiration for something. Okay. Because they know that it's killing you. That's the demonic goal is to sacrifice you, to kill you, to murder you, to maim you, to disable you, to make you not a functioning, anointed individual of God, basically.
Yeah, and if you don't believe that, look what they're doing to kids. Now, this is information from 2017.
Mm-hmm.
It says more than 7.2 million kids are on psychiatric drugs
Wow.
of
That's so
different kinds.
sad.
Over 622,000 of them are under the age of 5.
Bro, that is so
O-
sad.
Over 80,000 are on ADHD drugs, which are
Mm-hmm.
basically amphetamine.
Yeah.
You know,
You
over
know
over.
something else I would say is when I pray for people, one of my things is I tell them don't take any drugs the day I pray for you. Because I've prayed for people and the moment they got prayed for, I don't tell them to go off their drugs because that's between them and the Lord and I'm not a doctor. I'm just like don't take the drug for the day when I pray for you. And by the end of it, if you feel so obliged not to continue the drug use, that's up to you. And bro, so many people after I prayed for them, gone off the drug completely and healed from their sickness
Oh,
or their
that's great.
disorder. It's like it's fantastic, and but that drug, all those drugs that you're listing, those are completely satanic. They are demonic,
And they,
100%. They
and
disable your brain,
and these
like
are these are given to kids.
to
Over
children. Yes,
over 38,000 are on antidepressant drugs. Over
so terrible.
85,000 are on antipsychotic drugs. Those are the ones that rot your brain and turn it into a shrunken walnut. They destroy
Yep.
your peripheral system with long-term use. Over 389,000 are on anti-anxiety drugs, which are addictive. you know, and the side effects, I mean, for antidepressants, nausea, weight gain, trouble sleeping, dry mouth, blurred vision, dizziness, anxiety, headache, diarrhea or constipation, sexual problems, fatigues, tremors, increased swelling, lower alcohol tolerance, bleeding, lower
Mm.
sodium levels, vomiting, restlessness, muscle cramps, seizures. It just goes on and on and on. You look at the side effects, and there's just hundreds of them. Just these are
Interesting.
awful drugs. These are terrible drugs. The ones for anti-anxiety drugs. Uh, Let me see, are they the same? No,
Well,
they.
listen to this, bro. Somebody just commented in my thing because pharmakeia is witchcraft, but pharmakoi or pharmacosis is actually means sacrifice. Human ritual expelling from the community as part of the ritual. Yeah, ritual sacrifice is the word pharmakos. Did you know that?
Mm-mm.
Pharmakos in Greek. Wow, thanks, comment person. You, and by the way, thank you so much for the donations, guys. Again, I appreciate you all so much for donating to the channel to keep me being able to do these kind of things. I really, you guys are awesome. I really need your support, and it's great. But pharmakos, Greek plural pharmakeia, in ancient Greek religion was ritualistic sacrifice. Pharmakeia, they're telling you that you're being sacrificed with these drugs. That's the word. They're literally saying you're a sacrifice. Wow.
And that's what it looks like, because they're not curing anybody.
No.
Nobody's getting better with these drugs.
Dude, wow. That is
and all those diagnoses in the DSM, their Bible, the Psychiatric Bible, freaking all of them are made up. And all of them.
Yep.
There's not one objective test for any of those psychiatric diagnoses in that Psychiatric Bible. There's like, what, 291? They make them up.
Yeah.
You know,
they're all it's all demons. It's just demons titles, you know. I mean, like half of the drugs of the names of the drugs, bro, like they're names from ancient demons. I don't know if you know that, but like a lot of these things, like they're derived from demonic names. Like they literally name this stuff. Or like the drugs based on them are derived from demonic entities or demonic names. And you're like, that's weird. Why would it be that? Why they call it that? And then there's a demon over here with this similar sounding name. You know, and it's like in spelling, like if it sounds similar enough, it's good enough. Like that's how witchcraft works and demons work. It's like close enough. That's it. That's what it is. Because and like you're, you know, unaware of it. And the Bible says, "My people perish for lack of knowledge." This is a very, I mean, so many people don't want to know these things or they're afraid to study this stuff. But when you really look into it, you're like, oh my gosh,
oh yeah,
that's what it is.
They need to wake up. I mean,
mm-hmm.
you know, especially these churches that go, oh, we don't want to talk about demons. We, you know, we don't want to do exorcisms and
yeah.
or deal with people who are schizophrenic or pray for them or you know they just we don't want to deal with that. They're gonna need to wake up.
Mm-hmm.
You know, especially psychiatry. I mean,
a lot of churches need to wake up right now.
Psychiatry is doing humanity a huge disservice by trying to tell people that these things are hallucinations.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they are not hallucinations. The voices schizophrenics here are not hallucinations. They are intelligent entities, negative parasitic entities.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And psychiatry has not done one study on the voices at all.
You know? Yeah. Wow. In all of the years of doing it, they don't. That's because psychiatry is ran by the demons, guy. Like
well,
that's my
I suspect
theory.
So. And then you look at what
like
they're
just
doing.
like every other industry, bro.
Like, you look at what they're doing. They're going, oh yeah, these things are mental illness is caused by a biochemical imbalance of the brain.
Oh nonsense.
You know, and that's what we taught in graduate school. It's what I was taught. I went to work at this huge hospital, and I watched what the psychiatrists were doing. You figure if it's a chemical imbalance of the brain, they'd have some measurement to determine what's out of balance and by how much.
Mm-hmm.
No way. What they did is they sat there, the patient told them the symptoms, they went, okay, we'll start with this drug and see what happens. You know, it's like a guessing game. It's all subjective.
Mm-hmm.
There isn't any objective test to measure what drugs or what chemicals in the brain are out of balance or by how much.
Yeah.
They don't even know,
you know
what the chemical balance of the brain should be. They have no idea.
Wait. I heard that they came from dyes, you were saying, which I think is ironic because it's like dye is death, and this is like where a lot of these drugs stem from.
Yeah, that's where they came from. They came from a German dye lab.
Dye, death lab.
And then the French took it and they friggin' extracted the active ingredient from the dye, and then they wanted to test it on psych patients in Europe, but Freudianism was there then. They wouldn't allow it. So they brought it over here to the United States. They
flourished.
Took it on a psych ward, and it knocked out the entire psych ward.
Wow.
They could get away with less staff. There was less trouble. These guys were all gorked out, and they just kept them sedated in the psych ward, and that's what they're doing now.
You know, it's terrible. The other thing that's interesting is that like when it comes to these drugs and their capability, like they don't realize like how much of this. Well, I guess I shouldn't say that, but yeah, never mind. Well, I'll let that go. We'll have to do another show, bro. I think we're gonna have to do another show because I know you're coming up on 2 hours. That's gonna open up a whole nother doorway. Look, if I keep going, we're at 2 hours, I think, and I know that you got. I want to be respectful of your time, bro, because I could keep talking to you forever, dude.
Okay.
Like.
Well, any of you guys interested, before you take any psychiatric drugs, please try the Mace method. You can go to causisminstitute.com. You can go to my website and get yourself a Mace practitioner. Don't take those drugs first.
Yeah, well, the drugs are definitely demonic. I'd say, if you're ever going to debate on that too, also go to Demon Razors when my website's up, or find somebody that prays, that knows how to cast out demons. There's a whole website, Isaiah Saldivar. He's got a website. If you go to isaiahsaldivar.com, you can actually look up his deliverance map, and you can find people that cast out demons like what I do, which is the same kind of similar thing, I'm sure, to the Mace thing. We'll have to do another episode and discuss exactly how Mace works in specific or something, and talk about it, and then I'll explain how more of the forgiveness stuff works in more detail. But yeah, I'd say the same thing. Check out that before you ever do the drug stuff, because the drugs are terrible.
If you want to know how we came to the conclusion, Sherry Sweeney and I. Now, Sherry Sweeney, she heard voices when she was young, okay, and she got rid of them on her own without drugs. When I met her, we started talking about it. And we got to get this information out to the world. So if you want to find out how we came to the conclusion that these voices are demonic entities that are sucking your energy, go get this book. You can get it from my website at jerrymarzinsky.com.
What's it called? The Amazing Journey into the Psychotic Mind.
Right.
Breaking the spell. What's that? Breaking
the spell of the ivory tower. So
it's ironic you use the word spell in there, bro, because it really is a spell.
Well, it is a spell.
It's witchcraft, bro.
It's the crap they're saying. Oh yeah, there's a chemical imbalance in your brain. It's bull crap. They've disproven it over and over. They disprove it that it's not a genetic thing, so they don't know what it is. So they just keep saying, "Oh well, it's auditory and visual hallucinations."
Yep.
Which is they're doing a great disservice to humanity by doing that. They're throwing them off. Kind of putting a spell on people, which keeps them lost. If they knew that it was an entity or a demon, at least they wouldn't think it was them doing this to themselves.
Yeah, that would at least stop a lot of the misconstrued perspective.
Right.
So, well, these things are real, guys. Demons are real. Entities, these negative entities, they are the same thing. They want to kill you. The whole establishment is ran by people that create this stuff and listen to them. Also want to kill you. There's a pretty common theme, I think, guys, if you start looking at everything in the world, and it all tends to point to Jesus or like God in some capacity. Like, you gotta start to wake up to the realization that maybe there's something else going on here, guys. And I don't know how anybody doesn't deal with this stuff, come to the realization of God. But when people look into this and look into demonic things, I see God all over it. So
you want to see the evil. I mean, look at the chemtrails they're spraying all over the country, all over the world now.
Yes.
Now England just determined, oh well, we're going to spray England, where it's always dim and rainy and nasty anyway, and they're going to spray England to keep the sun from baking the earth.
Yeah.
But they were doing that all over the United States until Trump recently defunded all these GMOs, these government things. Now they finally stopped. But here in Tucson, I mean, they were flying over almost every day. They were spraying the skies here.
I'm in California. I see it all the time.
Yep, they did it all over. Every state I've been to.
Aluminum and borium and a bunch of other different metals.
Aluminum, barium, and they're all toxic. They're toxic to all life forms.
Yep, and they go on the end. They breathe them in. You get them in your blood. You get them in your barrier. They go between the blood-brain barrier. They get on the synapses of your brain and stop them from firing, supposedly. And so that way it actually makes you dumber, because it makes you not be able to think clearly. And it makes you, that's what I've heard, at least, doing some research, digging into it some more.
And they poison farmland. They poison the plants.
Yeah.
They poison the farmland so nothing grows there. Yeah. And they're spraying it by the ton, by the friggin' ton.
Yeah.
And saying, oh, those aren't chemtrails. Those are vapor trails. But you see them, they spray it and it spreads all over the sky. Vapor trails don't do that.
Yeah. There's contrails, condensation trails, and chemtrails, and there is definitely a difference. And they are spraying.
Huge difference.
it's very, very, very toxic, and it's all designed literally to poison you and
Yes.
to bring you into pharmakeia or pharmakoa, which is human sacrifice. You're a sacrifice, guys. Welcome to this world. This is why you need Jesus, so that he's the sacrifice. You don't have to sacrifice. You walk in wholeness and healing in the name of Jesus. Just saying. And then you don't have to suffer. Okay, so I don't know. That's it. It was a great show. This is fun, bro. Thanks for coming on, Jerry. I
All right.
appreciate you so
You're
much,
more than
man.
welcome.
You're awesome, dude. We'll have to do another one, and then we'll talk more details about all kinds of other creative things. I'll try to map out some questions that I want to. I know I just kind of like let God flow in this one, and we went where it went. But
Okay.
next one, I'll try to get like a map down for us, so we could like go over some stuff.
Okay. That's
All right.
that's a deal.
Awesome. All right. Appreciate you. I appreciate everybody watching. Check out, support Jerry, get his book. And, thank you guys for supporting the channel. I'm going to press stop. Don't hang up your computer, Jerry, because when I stop it, it's got to upload for a few seconds.
Okay.
But thanks everybody for coming on. I appreciate y'all. And God bless and have a good rest of your guys' day. Thanks, everyone. Bye.